Got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hey there, guys. So, welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. It's been a while, right? It's only my second live stream, I think, in 2 months, something like that. Anyway, welcome to you guys. The plan for today is we're going to play 2 clips from News Nation. I just want to talk a little bit about those. And then I want to just share some of my thoughts. Bear in mind, I've gone to Moscow, I've gone to 112 to King Road, I went to Pullman, and I just want to take you through my experience being there, which might be a little bit different from a news reporter, and it might be a little bit different from, let's say, the average true crime creator. And who knows, it might challenge your thinking, it might change your thinking, maybe it won't. So I want to hear what you guys think, and hopefully you guys are going to be interested in what I think. Hey, Timmy, what do you think? Okay, so we're going to start off by looking at an interview from Brian Enton. And this I sort of felt a little bit, I don't know if the word's triggered, but I certainly felt I wanted to respond to some of what was said here. So it's only a 5-minute interview. We're going to go through little pieces of it, and then we're going to talk about that. Then I'm going to give you my spiel. Then we'll probably go through another video, and then I might, if there's time, I might take you guys through some of the footage that I collected and the thoughts that I had while I was collecting it, I guess. So anyway, welcome to all of you guys. Chelsea, good to see you. Sharon, Rolana, good to see you guys. So here we go. Let me know, can you guys hear the sound?
He's been following the story, obviously, from the very beginning. He spent more time outside that house than I think anybody on this story. So this was a surprise. I mean, you just heard Caitlin and me talking about how surprised we both were. I'm sure you were as well. Any idea why now? Why so sudden? I mean, instantaneous. That the announcement to the families, the announcement to the press, the defense is in the same day for 2 days, and then within 2 weeks it's down.
So do you guys agree with that? Do you agree that this was sudden and a surprise? Do you agree with that aspect? Sharon says, please take the pin poll. Okay, so at least it is loud and clear. That's good. So we've only listened to 20 seconds of that, and she says this was a surprise. We didn't expect them to say they're going to demolish the house. Sybil says, yes, it was sudden. But if you think about the process that's kind of been going on, they've been talking about demolishing the house in a way for months. We've seen them go in and clean the house out. We've seen them board the house up. We've seen, we've heard that they've sold the house. So is it really a surprise? Is it really a surprise? What I'm trying to say is it's not like the first time it's ever been mentioned that the house is going to be demolished. To me, the surprise is that the house has been standing all this time, given what we actually know of the university's feelings about the house standing in the first place. And I'm going to remind you guys, I'm going to repeat a memo that was published, I think, in February. That's almost a year ago, 10 months ago, communicating what the university felt about this house. And does it matter what they feel? Does it matter what the university thinks and feels about this house? Is it really pertinent? Is it really relevant? So although it sounds a little bit strange, I'm going to play those first 20 seconds again, and I just want you to think a little bit more critically about what is being said, even though it's pretty obvious. And what Ashley says to Brian is, you've been in front of that house or outside that house more than anyone, right? And for us sitting here, we would say yes, because Brian Enton's a great reporter. And Brian Enton's one of the most dogged and determined and committed and consistent reporters. And that's great for the true crime community, and that's great for News Nation. But how do you think the students who live there feel about a reporter camped out in front of a house, not 24/7, but pretty much constantly? I mean, if the house itself isn't a reminder of what's going on, a reporter in front of that house driving attention to it constantly, which was taking place last year, certainly is kind of going to achieve that, right? So let's go back 20 seconds and just play those first few seconds.
Senior national correspondent Brian Enton, he's been following the story, obviously, from the very beginning. He spent more time outside that house than I think anybody on this story. So this was a surprise. I mean, you just heard Caitlin and me talking about how surprised we both were. I'm sure you were as well.
So I often feel that the mainstream media, especially in terms of true crime, is quite tone deaf in terms of itself. Sometimes I feel the same way about true crime channels. And I'm kind of want to put the ball in your court and say, is that the case, or is it just a totally irrelevant question to be asking, given what we are here to do, which is to think about justice, to talk about injustice, and to try and pursue, that sort of thing. And the reason why I said it's tone deaf is, at the same time that she's saying, why is this house being demolished? She's saying, our reporter's been in front of that house all the time, more than anybody else. Isn't there possibly a link between those two? Isn't there possibly a link between a house that's being demolished and the fact that you've got a reporter in front of that house the whole time? And of course, it didn't happen to Brian Enton, the same thing that happened to Nancy Grace. Remember what happened to Nancy Grace? She went there, she put a table in front of the house, and some of the students vocalized and expressed how they felt about that, right? And how do you think they felt? Do you think they felt positive or negative? Thanks a lot, Reform BBC. Someone says they backed away from demolishing it months ago. Why do you think they did that? And do you think they said, no, we've changed our minds, we're not going to demolish? Or do you think they said, okay, we understand how important this is, we also want justice, we're going to give you guys a little bit more time? This case needs to go to trial, it is going to go to trial, okay, we'll give you guys a couple more months to take this case to trial. And isn't that exactly what they did? They gave them more time. What happened with that time? Wasn't it sort of used up with bickering about media access and this, that, and the next thing, right? Thanks a lot, Rolana. Thank you. So let's play a little bit more from this interview.
Any idea why now? Why so sudden? I mean, instantaneous. That the announcement to the families, the announcement to the press, the defense is in the same day for 2 days, and then within 2 weeks it's down.
Well, excuse me. I might be coughing a little bit as I do this. Please excuse me. But let me again ask you guys, why do you think it's now? And again, do you think it's so surprising? Why now? It's so sudden. It's not really so sudden if you've been meaning to do it for a year. Why now, but without being sort of indignant and like, I've got no idea why it is now? What is a reasonable, sensible reason for why now that actually makes complete sense. Joe Huck says the FBI has gone back to a 3D model of the house. Juliana says every school student and alumni wants. That's I think part of the answer. That's a good answer. I tend to agree with that. Mo Rama, good to have you been caught alive. There you go. That's basically the answer. And the answer is, I think, twofold. The one is they were prepared to kind of allow, it's almost, it was a bad situation. The house was standing, it was already February, and it was kind of too late. And they kind of just let the house stand, and they thought it's, it's already out there in the media. And then they let everything go on for the whole year. Right. And they said, it's not ideal. Let's try and compromise here. Right. Let's compromise. Let's try and give this party what they want and that party what they want. But by the end of the year, they basically said, we don't want another year that contaminates the student experience, that kind of pollutes and traumatizes the what do you call it? The vandal spirit, I guess, right? And if you haven't been there yourself, you just tend to think of the house, and because that's all you really know. You just know the house and the surrounding area. But if you haven't driven from there to the middle of town, you haven't just seen random people moving around, going about their lives. You haven't seen how the house fits into the landscape and how far away from the house you can actually see the house. Then, I mean, that tower, the tower that's right by the house, is visible virtually everywhere. And in a way, the tower and the house are kind of, I don't know, they echo one another. You can also, and that tower is a place where a lot of students go to, I don't know, take selfies, to get a sense of themselves. There's also a beautiful park. I think it's called an arboretum or something. It's like a botanical garden, essentially, right behind the 1122 King Queen Road. There's this garden, and it's a place where lovers go. It's a place where friends would go just for some quiet time. It's a place where probably residents of Moscow go, perhaps on a Sunday or weekend, just to relax. It's a place to go when you want to perhaps go for a walk. I'm not sure if you can take dogs there, but it's certainly a nice place for a stroll. And so right next to these peaceful symbols and to some extent powerful symbols of community is this dark cloud, right next to it. Sybil says, I think the prosecution does have enough and doesn't need the house anymore. But anyway, just to come back to the question, why now? Well, now is really the best time. It's the end of the year. The students have left. They can break down the house. The media are probably going to have gone home and not cover this. And true crimers as well are probably going to be, to some extent, caught up in the Christmas spirit. And so while everyone is enjoying the festive season, this dirty work, this task can be done without kind of interference and fuss. And then the students coming back for the next year can start with a clean slate, in a sense. Okay, so doesn't it make sense to you that it makes complete sense to do it now, when people are going to be not fussing about it, and it was something that they've been meaning to do all along? But the bottom line is they're trying to start the next year. Bear in mind, some students have completed their studies now, and other students are coming early next year to start their studies. And they're trying to, for the benefit of those students, clear some of this negative, toxic stuff out of the fabric. Does that make sense? Okay, let's play some more.
First of all, I think they got about a 2.5 hour heads up, the family. It was about 2.5 hours. They got the call, and then the press release went out where we all found out that there is an official date of December 28th. The timing is interesting. I mean, just a couple of days after Christmas sort of makes sense because students won't be there on campus. But I also wonder if they're thinking right between Christmas and New Year's, is that a time when, you know, the media will stay away, when everybody's busy, when...
So I must say I agree with everything he's saying from his perspective. But I think what's also missing the point here is I think the reason the university didn't give like a 1 month heads up or a longer heads up was that they felt this is not up for debate. We are going to demolish this house. We're not going to kind of have consultations about it. We don't want it to generate any more negative publicity than it already has. And I mean, if you think about it, it would be pointless giving a really long heads up, like, hey guys, let's say in September or October or November, hey, we're going to raise this house on that date, but we want to give you guys a chance to kind of get emotional about it, to have, I don't know, hearings about it, to make a big deal about it in the media. It's our house. It's the house now belongs to the university. We have decided to get rid of it now, and it's final. And so obviously they are going to do that in a way to minimize the sort of collateral coverage, which is exactly kind of what's happening here. I'm certainly not here to petition to save the house, to say we should keep the house. And I understand the popular thing is to say, no, we should keep the house until the trial. I'm not actually here to say that. I know a lot of you want to hear that. From a legal perspective, it makes absolute sense to keep the house. I was at the house, and from the perspective of going there, it really is important to get a sense of the house. I agree with that. I agree 100%. But I'm going to explain during this live why I still think they are right to be doing what they're doing. And maybe you guys will agree with me and maybe you won't. But I'm basing it on attending another murder trial in Texas, where I also went to that crime scene. I went to the crime scene in the night. I actually don't think I went to it in the day. The crime did happen at night. And then what happened in that case? You know, was it necessary for the jury to go to that crime scene? And that was also quite an important crime scene to get a sense of the geography of the place, right? In the John Benet Ramsey case, even the grand jury, bear in mind, it's not a proper trial. It's not like all the elements of a trial. The grand jury even went to visit the scene. I know in the Henry van Breda axe murder case, the judge also went to the site of what happened there. And it is sometimes necessary to do that. I want to address the question, is it absolutely necessary and essential for that to happen here? And maybe you guys will agree with me and maybe you won't, but we're going to go through it step by step. Yeah, I mean, that is really the bottom line. How do the students feel about this? And how do you think they feel about it? Let me ask you this. I mean, I know it's not the same. How do you think the students feel about this? I mean, if the university have decided to demolish the house, do you think it's because they're acting against what the majority of students feel or not? So Kelly says, kind of snarkily, is a legal perspective out the window now? Not at all. So I'm going to give you what I think is a balanced legal perspective from my point of view. You may disagree with it, and also something that is beyond the legal perspective. And you might say the legal perspective trumps all. And I mean, you can imagine in a true crime community that most of us would think that. And that I especially would think that. You would think that, right? Nan says, I've not heard any information regarding students' opinion. Well, I can tell you that they have probably decided within fraternities how they're going to deal with this case, how they're going to deal with social media, and how they're not going to deal with it. But I think what happened when Nancy Grace went there, does that tell you anything, or does it tell you nothing? Does it tell you something about how some students feel, or doesn't it tell you anything? Christina says, I think the university wanted gone more than the students. I suppose another way of thinking about it is if you were a student and this house was next door to you, how would you feel about it? Anyway, let's continue.
And they can kind of try to do this under the radar. Perhaps that's the reason that they picked that time. But actually, I just want to remind you, like, the house is not in the middle of the campus. It's in a neighborhood right next to the campus. So I get that it's upsetting for the students and it's a distraction and it's hard to look at, but it's not like they have to walk by it every day in the middle of the school. I still just don't understand why take the chance, you know?
So I find that kind of statement is what made me really want to go live. You know, so you said a couple of things there. You said, I get that it's upsetting the students. Now, Brian Internet, more than anyone else, probably would know that, having stood in front of that house, having reported, having tweeted about it, right? Probably he knows more than anyone how the students feel. And he says, I get that they, what does he say? I get that they don't like it, or what does he say?
Right next to the campus. So I get that it's upsetting for the students and it's a distraction and it's hard to look at, but.
So there he says, I get that it's upsetting. I get that it's a distraction. Bear in mind, it's not just that the kids around there want to have fun. They must also, they've got a job to do. They've got to study. And so you kind of have this constant narrative of whatever going on the sidelines, right? I must say, I was astonished to hear Brian say that it's like not in the middle of everything. I understand what he's getting at, but it almost implies that it's not as visible as you might think. And what's quite interesting is Ashley actually says to him something along the lines of, well, let me play what she says. So he says, well, I don't really know what the big deal is because it's not really that visible. And then Ashley kind of says, actually, it is pretty visible.
It's not like they have to walk by it every day in the middle of the school. I still just don't understand why take the chance. You know, why not just leave the house up until the trial, like we've seen in other situations, like we saw in Parkland and all sorts of other cases we've covered. I don't understand that. I just don't get the rush.
So I'm going to play Ashley's response to that, but I also want to address that question because it's an important question by the end of this analysis. In other words, why are they doing this? Like, why are they actually allowing the house to be demolished? Why take the risk? I'm going to answer that question. And it's up to you guys to say what you think, whether you agree. But it is a legal thing that I'm dealing with. And it's my opinion from a legal perspective on whether it is such a big risk or not. Is it such a big risk to be doing what's going on? I better say this before I forget. Another thing that I think is pertinent is it's not as though this house is the same house as it was, let's say, 12, 13 months ago. In other words, everything inside it is gone. The windows have been boarded up for a really long time. And that already, just that one thing changes the house very significantly. Just boarding up all those windows changes your perception of that house significantly, because the essential thing that you'd want to do if you were taking a jury there is put lights inside that house and then drive by the house with the lights on. Put the lights on and be in certain locations quite far away, looking towards the house, but from the perspective of a car. You wouldn't get any of that with it boarded up. Now, obviously, for the purposes of a trial, just for that, they could take the boarding off. I'm not sure if they would do that. I'm not sure if they would think to do that, but that would be quite important to do. And that's why in the image behind me, I'm not showing the house in the daytime. I'm showing, if you look at the image over there, you can see right inside one of the rooms, right? From quite a long distance away, and these were images taken by news reporters. And you could see the place was like a fishbowl. And that is the thing that you would want to recreate for the jury, because when this crime occurred was at night, and presumably the killer could tell who was home, and specifically the person or persons he was targeting, whether they were home. And I do think there's a critical legal question that arises. Did the killer mean to kill one person, two people, three people, four people, or more than four people? Was his target one person or four people? What's the answer? And I think to some extent, the house itself may give an answer to that question. If he intended to kill four students, he could have done that before Maddie arrived home, right? You know what I mean? They could have done that kind of earlier. Sorry, shouldn't say they, he or she, but let's just say he. So why did he wait until he did wait? And how did he know everyone was home when he executed the crime? In other words, who was his real target? And does the house provide any indication of that? Any indication that how can I put it? That's something that he could have determined because of the way the house is constructed, right? Perry says, my guess is it's the university that wanted down. I don't think you need to guess. Okay, let's play the rest.
Yeah, it's hard one. I mean, and I remember when you gave us the tour and you showed us when you stood in front of the house facing us, and then walked, opposite to the camera down the hill. You literally within 50 steps were at the fraternity houses, and Ethan's fraternity house specifically. So while they don't have to walk by, I suppose they could look up and see it there. But I'm with you. It's always been. I'm surprised it's.
So there, she's kind of saying just how visible the house is. So Brian's kind of making the point that he doesn't understand. It's not like this house is in the middle of the student, in the middle of the university, but it kind of is in the middle of the student, a residential area, especially for the students. I don't think anyone can argue with that. I'm not saying it's like bang in the middle of the university. I am saying, first of all, it is extremely visible, and then it's extremely visible by more than one fraternity, and that's kind of where the problem starts, is that fraternities want to fraternize, and they don't want this kind of object in their field of view, in a sense. And as she says, it just takes them to look up and there it is, right? Now, I've said this before, there's another way of dealing with this. You could paint the building, you could plant trees in front of it, you could do all sorts of things that could alter it. But but I think the other side of the story is that the university wants to contain the manner in which this case is being sensationalized, and that is also, so in other words, it's not just the actual structure itself in real time, it's also people coming along, recording the structure and putting it into digital spaces, and that then coming into the the field of influence of these students, which can also be distracting, which can also be demoralizing, which can also be depressing, right? Does that make sense? I think I'm gonna show you guys a couple of pictures just to show you what I'm talking about. So let's start with this one. I'll come back to, can you guys see that? Let's just do that. So this is a photograph that is basically part of the University of Idaho's marketing material. In other words, when they want to promote the university and the campus, this would be a picture that they would use. It's got the branding of the University of Idaho, it's got the iconic tower there. And let me ask you, can you see the funhouse, 1122 King Road / Queen Road? Can you see it on this picture? Can you see 1122 King Road / Queen Road on this picture? Right, and there it is. It's right over there. Right, there it is. So that's how visible it is. And like I said earlier, I've stood at this tower, and you can see the house from there, and you can see the house from there, and you can see the house from there. And this house is kind of on a slight hill. So it's actually higher than a lot of these buildings. So you could see the house from these buildings and so on and so on. Of course, this part over here is cut off, but there's a lot of buildings over here, and there's a hill over here as well, you know, and in order to get to park in this complex of apartments, a whole lot of cars are going to come through here and park all along there, directly behind this house. And so, you know, saying that it's not as though you go past the house on your way to campus, well, it is for quite a large fraction of people. For quite a large fraction of people, I'd say easily 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, you would see that house every single day, right? You would see that house every single day. Yeah, that's true. I wouldn't say that all roads lead to the crime scene. I actually found it quite difficult to get there, even with even knowing where it was, and even with Google Maps. It's a little bit tricky getting there, and the roads do narrow quite substantially. But having said that, there are cars all along the road there and around the house and behind the house, just cars everywhere. Okay, so let's have a look at something else. So, you know, that was the time when you still had the contents of the windows, sorry, the the contents behind the windows. And what I found really interesting was how often you seem to be able to get a view right into the house from all sorts of angles. Now, bear in mind the crime happened at night, which suggests that nobody closed the curtains habitually in the house. And I think that would be another legal question. If I was a prosecutor and I put one of the survivors on the stand, I would say, did you guys tend to close curtains, you know, across the windows at night? And I would imagine those on the bottom floor maybe did that, but those on the top didn't, because you couldn't really see into, from a distance, you couldn't really see into the uppermost floors to the extent that you might be able to see someone changing on the lower floors, but you wouldn't be able to see that as easily on the higher floors. But it would be interesting to hear what she says. There's an image from the balcony. I'm not sure if it's actually that house or it's the house in front of it. There's the balcony. And there you get a sense of all the other structures that look towards the house. And you can see this house is above many of the other houses. But you can see just from how far away this structure is extremely visible. And that is part of the legal question in terms of the crime is if a stalker was driving around and they were having a party, could he watch them and easily see them at night? And the answer is yes, absolutely. And I made this case so many times when I was covering this that I believe this crime was committed because of someone who was what's the word? Can't think of it now. So I just had a bit of a mind blank. When you help me out, guys. What happens when you see something every day? What's the answer? No, not it is peeping Tom. It is a voyeur, but what does that amount to? Covered. Thanks so much, thought criminal. I don't know why that word just completely, but that is, I think, part of the psychological mechanism that allowed the criminal psychology to strengthen was because the girls in the house were so visible, so very visible. Someone driving around who wasn't attending these parties was able to covet and become obsessed and see what he couldn't have, right? Does that make sense? And I think that is part of, the legal argument is to what extent the coveting was possible because of what this house looked like and because of its situation on the hill relative to all the other houses there. It really sticks out almost like a small fairy tale castle. It really sticks out as how can I put it, as a party house. You can see it from miles away, you can hear it from miles away, you can see people outside of it and inside of it from miles away as well. So someone who liked someone inside and they were having a problem getting that person's attention and became an obsession, you can see how that could be aggravated to some extent by just how visually accessible it was. And that's one of the things a jury would be able to appreciate if they went there and the house was still standing there. The question is, would they not be able to appreciate it if the house is gone? Would they just have no ability to see it from photos like this one? Thanks, baby kisses, and thanks to you guys who said covered. Okay. There again, you get a real sense of just how this house sticks out compared to everything else. And you can see how easily visible it is through line of sight, through all of these structures over here. And it's so visible that media reporters were able to find a position and look right into the kitchen and take photos like this one from Fox News. And so if reporters could do that, why couldn't someone driving in a vehicle? Look how accessible it is, this view into this room here. And so again, whose interests should be uppermost here? These the victims, their families, the interests of justice. Whose interest should be the most important? And that was kind of the way the house was almost around the exact time when the crime happened. You can see this window's got blinds over it. That one has none. Yeah, the windows are partially closed. These are completely open. That's also open. I don't know if you guys remember photos, I think, of Maddie's room. You could actually see her pink boots right through the window. There you can see, again, it's another view inside the house. There's a very good example of just how far you can see from another fraternity. And you're not really very elevated in this point. You're not high on a hill. You're just simply around the corner. Look how visible that is. Even from this angle, you can kind of see right into the house over there, over there, over there. Okay.
Such a battle. I don't think the university wants to make money off the property. I don't think that's what this is about. But it sure is sort of a sad battle that this family's had to go through. The families have had to go through, and not all of them agree. You know, that.
So that's also, I think, an interesting point, is that some of the families don't agree with the families that say the house should not be demolished, right? And if you think about it, I'm not sure if it's Ethan's family that's one of those. I suspect that it is. But if you think about it, Ethan, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't Ethan have a younger brother and sister, and they were still attending college, that college? And so if anyone knows what the student experience was like in the aftermath, it would be them. And how do they feel about it, right? Isn't that a really good example of getting a sense of who we really need to protect here?
The Chapins, they haven't joined the fray in terms of families that want to keep that house standing. They've sort of not weighed in either way, publicly, that is. But certainly the Gonzalez family have led the way with other family members saying, just keep it there. What's the rush? What if there's a mistake in someone? Like, here we are. Brian, how many?
So I might show you some of my photos. It's hard to actually, I suppose it's actually not that hard, but how can I put it? When you there yourself, you almost feel like you can reach out and touch the edge of that balcony, because the road slopes really steeply up from the house to the road. And you can can you see where this tree is over here? Over here. You can stand almost where this tree is, and you could theoretically hold onto the side of the tree with one hand and stretch out your arm, and you would almost be able to touch the pillar of that balcony. That's how close it is. And I have to say, in terms of the crime scenes, the houses that were crime scenes that I visited, this must be one of the most open, accessible, easy to reach houses that I've ever been to. The Ramsey house now has got a fence around it, and the garden and the trees have overgrown to such an extent that it's kind of like looking at a forest. You kind of got to break through bush. You feel like you need a panga. You need to kind of do some bushwhacking to just get a good view of the house, right? And if you're driving down the road where the Ramsey house is, it's easy to just drive completely past it because it's so shielded, like with a garden, but it's also got a fence. Probably one of the most accessible houses now is the Watts home, because it's not got any kind of fencing in front of it, but that house has already been changed paint-wise, and essentially all you can really see is the the garage doors and the driveway. But because they've changed the house, it looks very different. Also, as soon as you go around the corner, you can't see that house at all. This house is totally different. You can go around a corner and another corner and another corner, and you can still see it because it sort of pops out. Just trying to think what the other thing is that she said there. Okay.
How many times have we seen FBI or police or members of the defense team coming back in the last couple of months to, I don't know, do some extra work they need?
So that is a totally valid point. And in fact, when Brian was kind of hanging out in front of the house, I don't know if you guys remember, two investigators, that they seemed like CSI techs. They seemed like they were there to collect DNA samples or something. But they were there when Brian was there, and that's how he was able to record the thing. Nobody else did. And that showed, they seem to be from the prosecution side. I don't know for sure, but she's absolutely right that does happen. It happens so often in cases where a really good example is in the Madeleine McCann case, that they gave back the apartment, and then 2 or 3 months later, what is it, May, June, July, basically 3 to 4 months later, let's say 3 months later, they went back to the apartment and they found really important evidence, right? And that was definitely a mistake made by the law enforcement in that case, right? Another thing they did was they gave back the vehicle, and then they also found something in the vehicle. So mistake number 2. So she's making a really good point, but I don't know if you could say that in this case they've given the house back too soon. I suppose you could argue, allow the trial to take place. That's a fair argument, but it's already been over a year, and they have been going back several times, right? But I'm going to make the case why maybe. Anyway, let's play the rest of this interview.
Needed to do.
Yeah, and who knows, they might need to do something else that they haven't thought of yet, or maybe the jury will want to see the house. Steve Gonzalez, Kaylee's dad, made a good point to me last month when I spoke to him about this. He said, if this stays in the county and they don't move it, and they're trying to find a juror who is unbiased, it could very well be a farmer. And to him, a farmer isn't going to want to see a 3D image or a computer view. They're going to want to go out and see the house for themselves. And they're saying, well, the inside is different, and it's been, there's been chemicals and you can't walk around. But even the outside, Ashley, maybe they're going to want to stand on the street and say, what could you actually see from that window? Or what could you see from the front to the back of the house? Or what exactly does the road look like in that area compared to the house?
So that is a really good point. It's not only what could you see from the perpetrator's perspective. In other words, driving around, here's the house, driving around, what can you see from this point, that point, that point? Bear in mind, they can kind of track where Brian Koberg was driving. They can say he was here and he was there and he was there. Well, what was he looking at from a particular location, right? On the other hand, that you could also say from the inside of the house, what could someone see, but also who could be seen? And I think a really pertinent question is, of all the rooms in the house and of all the individuals in the house, which one would you say was the most vulnerable to a peeping Tom? Let me say that again. Of all the rooms in the house and of all the individuals in that house, which one do you think was the most vulnerable to a stalker, someone who's coming around there looking into the house, a stalker, a peeping Tom, someone who was coveting one of them? Which room would you say was the most vulnerable? I don't think there's any doubt about that. And so if you're going to say, I don't think Maddie was the primary target, well, it sure seems like there was, how can I put it? It sure seems like there's evidence based on the house and on which room she stayed in and on how close that room is to the road, that she would be very easy to see when she's there, when she's not there, what she's doing when she's there, all that kind of thing, compared to all the other rooms in the house, which are kind of not like that. Yeah. So a lot of you guys have consensus on that, right? So Jackie says, maybe you've become desensitized. Interesting comment. Maybe I've become desensitized. Okay. Maybe you should give me a chance to make my point, which I actually haven't started making yet.
They may not even have
Brian,
to go inside.
Let me ask you that, because you have a very unique ability to say, I saw the digital replications of the house before I got there, before you landed for the first time in Idaho and went to that property. How different was it when you got there? What surprised you in person? Because you walked around the back, like you were taken all around the house, which other reporters haven't done. So you tell me how different it would be looking at a digital model.
So you could ask me the same question, is when I got there myself in person, how is it different to what I thought it would be? And the answer is, I think the house was smaller than I thought it would be. I think the area was a lot more kind of claustrophobic. You sort of felt like I was driving not like a big car, but nevertheless an SUV, and I sort of felt like I was driving very narrow roads with cars kind of shouldering one another, and it felt very. And I sort of thought to myself, I mean, I thought it before, but I thought the guy who committed this crime was totally nuts, because you are driving into a kind of a dead end. There are cameras everywhere, but you may not have realized that. But also, it's very hard to go in and go out easily, quickly, and without being seen, all of those things. In fact, it's very easy to go in and get stuck and be seen, and you can't drive very quickly, especially if you go around the back way. And that really surprised me. From all the photography I'd seen, all the footage I'd seen, the house seemed to be in a lot of space, and it seemed to be quite a big structure. And when I was there, I was surprised it was so small, and that the roads around it were such a, like a, I don't know, very snug around there. There wasn't really a lot of room to move. And you kind of get a sense of that in the footage that's playing between Ashley Banfield and Brian Enton. Let me just go back slightly. Look at the image in the center where you see all the other vehicles parked around the house, but especially to the left of the house.
Went to that property. How different was it when you got there? What surprised you in person? Because you walked around the back, like you were taken all around the house, which other reporters haven't done. So you tell me how different it would be looking at a digital model compared to showing up there for the first time and you know, getting the real feel.
It's a very unique house. It's the 3 stories. Part of it is into the ground. It's a very unique driveway. I mean, you see in the video here, it's this steep driveway that goes up around the house. There's an apartment complex on one side. I mean, when I went, my first thought was like, it's just an interesting sort of little corner of this street.
So can you see, just in terms of that perspective, how quickly and easy it was to get right up to this bedroom that's over here? Did you see how easy that was? And especially if you are looking at someone who's not only inside this bedroom, but outside on the balcony, especially in summer, to be very, very visible to someone who is simply driving around there. And at this point, there's a open space for a car to park here, which would be literally right there.
Street that you can't really visualize unless you're there. And again, they may have questions, the jury may have questions about the outside. What could you hear if you were on one side of the house? Could you hear things? You know, I mean, who knows what they might want to feel out there? That's why.
Okay, so I've seen a couple of insulting messages saying, "Well, of all people, I can't believe you have gone over to the dark side. I can't believe you supporting getting rid of evidence," or something like that. I think maybe give me a chance just to make my point. And it's also based on attending another murder trial where, as I say, I went there also at night. And as far as I know, the jury never went there themselves. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. Let me just kind of go through my spiel. Let's just bring me into the thing. So, first of all, I've attended trials, I've watched trials, and very often you hear a judge talking about trying to weigh and balance everyone's interests. And then you kind of think, what does he mean by that? Well, he means the rights of the victim's family, the public interest, the rights to privacy, the rights of the public, obviously, to know what's going on. And even the perpetrator has the right to a free trial. Even the perpetrator has a couple of rights. And so what a judge has kind of got to do is try and balance all of these in a way that kind of keeps everyone happy, but doesn't compromise justice, if that makes sense. In other words, it is a sort of a compromise in many different areas. I know in the Oscar Pistorius case, they didn't show him, but they played his voice. You could hear his voice. And so that is to some extent balancing the interests of society with the requests from the perpetrator. Another thing that I must talk about, and I'd love to talk about this in detail, is have you ever gone to a crime scene like this? Have you ever gone there yourself and taken photos? Have you ever done that? And I can tell you what my experience has been. Where I went to Portugal, I went to apartment 5A, right to the door of it, and right around. It's also a very exposed apartment in terms of that complex. I went there. What did that feel like? What did it feel like to be there with a camera taking footage with all these other apartment blocks around you? And I can tell you, what is it like going to Boulder and getting out the vehicle and walking around the Ramsey home, and then a neighbor comes out? What did that feel like? I can tell you. What did it feel like when I went to Austin and I was looking for the house where Mo Wilson was killed, and I got out my vehicle and I was walking around and going down this alley and that alley, and someone was actually staying in that house, I believe, when I was there. What did that feel like? And I can take you through one after the other. But my question is, have you ever gone to a house like this with your camera and taken photos? So that's a valid point to say, I wouldn't appreciate the removal of the home. It's a valid point. I think I'm going to jump the gun a little bit and just say something that I didn't write down, but I think is quite important to say. One thing the jury are going to see that you are not going to see, and I'm not going to see, and I'm not actually sure if the gallery will see it, because I've been in a couple of trials. Well, I've been in the Laurie Vallow trial where they didn't really allow the gallery to see certain what's the word, images of either a crime scene or the cadaver, right? But what the jury are going to see in this particular case is they're going to see the inside of that house where all the blood still was, and they're going to see photos of all four of the victims, right? And that is really the most important thing for the jury to see. And I think people are forgetting that part. The jury are going to see the victims as they are lying in their beds and everything as it was around them, based on the perspective of the first responding officers. You're going to see probably from the body cam and you're probably going to see it from crime scene photos, and none of that will probably ever make its way into the public space, and it shouldn't. It's a little like Gannon Stokes. It's the same thing. It's for the purposes of the trial. It's not for public consumption. What I'm trying to say is, if you compare the importance of the footage as the murderer left his victims to looking at the outside of the house, you kind of just can't compare it at all. You can't compare it at all. And if you've been at a trial recently, like I was, where you see photos of, for example, Mo Wilson, and you see the injuries she got, you know, just like this, basically what happened. You can see just from those injuries that she was actually ducking while a gun was pointed right at her. You don't need it explained to you. You get a sense of the real thing instantly. Christina says, I've gone to quite a few homes. So Christina, my question in the poll is, do you think true crime is sensitive enough? So when you went to these homes, did you kind of get a funny feeling, or did you sort of feel, I have every right to be here, I can be here all day if I want to, and if a neighbor drove by or someone walked by, that's fine. Did you kind of get a funny feeling, or not really? Excuse me. Christina, any thoughts? Christina, what does Christina say? Okay, Timmy, I'm going to put you down. I'm really getting hot. I'm waiting for Christina to respond, but I'm not really seeing a response. So Helena says, I would think you would get a funny feeling. That's not really what I'm getting at. You actually feel like you're intruding on someone else's, what's the word? Someone else lives in a certain place and you don't, and someone else must continue living in that place and you don't have to. And you do feel that it's a kind of, it feels like it could be a bit of an invasion of privacy. And yeah, privacy. And I'm not saying it is private. I mean, I'm not saying it is private, but I'm saying when you are there and someone kind of walks by and you're not really from there, but you are there because of the criminal aspect. I think you can't help but be aware of how sensitive am I to the people who live here, or how insensitive am I to the people who live here, right? And so I think if you reflexively say we are all sensitive enough, then I don't know whether we are. Like if you just say, no, we totally are sensitive enough. Really, are we? Do we need to think about being a bit more sensitive? I'll try and find the footage I took, but there was a point where I was right by the 1122 King Road. I was right next to the house, almost at this spot, maybe a little bit further back. I was kind of around here, right? I was kind of around that area. when two students just came around the corner and they were walking by me, and I was standing there, and I'm not a student, right? And I had my phone on the house, and they are there. They are walking around coming from something that's not crime related. What do you think, me standing there, and I'm not from Moscow, I'm not from the university, I'm not even from America, and here I am standing outside the house, and they are from there. What do you think they feel and think when they see that? They are thinking and feeling, you're only focused on one thing in this place where we are from. There are a lot of other things that are going on there. There are a lot of positive things that are going on there. And we're trying to not get over this, but we're trying to move beyond this. Are you really helping us, kind of thing, right? And what I thought was really interesting, and I don't know what the other word is, interesting and also troubling, was as these guys came around the corner, I not only stopped filming, but I sort of felt like putting my phone in my pocket and walking off, right? Why did I feel that way? Why did I feel kind of embarrassed? Why did I kind of feel why did I do that, right? Well, part of it is because I've felt sensitive to what they were thinking and feeling. And part of it was because there is a troubling thing going on. And this is the part that I think everyone's missing. This house isn't in a neighborhood just like yours. This house is in a student neighborhood where there are young people. The people who died in this case aren't the same as many other crimes. They are young people, 20 years old, 21 years old. 4 people who are basically in their very early 20s. 2 survivors who are also very young people. And so do they deserve to have additional help and support than somebody else? And my answer would be yes, they do. A younger person struggles, I think, more with trauma than an older person, than an adult, someone who's, 25, 30, 40, whatever it is. And so I think it's one thing to say, I'm interested in this case, and we should have the same rules for any other case. Well, what's different about this case is it's a student community, and they're not 30-year-old students, although I was quite an old student towards the end of my time. I studied for quite a long time, but most of them weren't. I mean, Kaylia, I think, was about to leave was she 21 or 22 years old? But she was done, her studies were done, and she was still only 21 years old. And I think the same applies to many others. So thanks for that comment. I would hope that I'm not desensitized. I would hope that I'm not. And I would hope that certainly my community are resensitized, or at least aware that there's a more sensitive way of thinking about this. 21, okay. My mother died when I was 17, and my father actually still lives my mother didn't die in the house that we used to live in, but it's still quite hard for me to go to that house because I remember her. So should you demolish that house? But the point is, I was 17 years old. My sister was a lot younger than me, and I think it's had a lifelong impact on her because she was a lot younger. So should someone's interest be protected? And you might say, you're just projecting your own trauma onto everybody else. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm just sensitive to something that I experienced, and I'm saying maybe we should be sensitive to what someone else experienced. Maybe I know a little bit about it. Yeah. And bear in mind, I'm a true crime creator. It's not like I'm the morality police or something. It's kind of in my interest to have the house stand as long as possible. But I'm not thinking about my interests. I'm thinking about the greater good and the public interest. It's a little bit of a different conversation. Am I aware of the legal side of things? Absolutely. Do I think that this is absolutely needed in order to prove a case? Absolutely not. In other words, if the house is raised, are the prosecution going to lose their case? Don't be absurd. Is the prosecution case that weak? And if you say there's a terrible risk here that if you get rid of the house, no one's going to remember what it looked like, and you could lose your case. So let me continue making my point. I didn't really think I would go down that angle. I do think the part that's often overlooked or misunderstood is the public interest. Those words almost sound like if the public are interested enough in something that they should be given unlimited access. So what is in the public interest? Well, if the public are interested, let them be interested. That's not what the public interest means. That's not the spirit. That's not really the spirit of what those words mean. The public interest actually refers to society. What is in the interest of society? And we are talking about a student society, and what is in the interest of serving the greater good for that student society, right? That's what we're talking about. That's one of the factors. Another factor is, can we think about the interests of this court case? And they have, which is why they've allowed this house to stand for a year. It's not as though they just demolished it in February. They could have demolished it in February. So they have, to some extent, accommodated the interests of the court and the interests of the victims' families, some of them. So I've kind of got almost a contradictory view both ways. On the one hand, I feel like the house shouldn't be destroyed ever, which I think a lot of you disagree with. You can destroy it after the trial, but I'm saying by destroying the house, you then the perpetrator really does win, and I don't really like that. So that's my one position, is that we need to have a stronger psychological resilience, that we get over our trauma. What are ways that we can deal with changing this house and changing other crime scenes in future? And I wrote a long essay about that on my channel, on my community page. A lot of you guys probably already seen it. But that's one part of the argument, is never raise the house. You're completing the criminal's work if you do that. And I feel very strongly about that. But the other side of the story is, well, what about the greater good? If you have decided to raise the house, when should you do it? Why should you do it? How should you do it? All that kind of thing. Now I want to take you guys to 5 points. The public interest has got to do with the welfare of the folks who actually live in Moscow and have to live with the house and its legacy. That's really the public interest that we are talking about. I agree 100% that it does make sense in a purely legal sense to hold on to 1122 King Road. In a purely legal sense, it makes sense. In terms of the greater good, it doesn't make sense. And like I said, no one can sell me on the value of preserving the actual structure. No one can tell me no one can convince me that that's important, because I already know how important it is. Me, like having written so many books, the physical crime scene is extremely important, because nothing is going to give you a clearer sense of the context and the configuration of the crime and the fabric and the crime scene within and without than with the structure still standing. But I would say that the crime scene footage from the actual crime scene with the victims there, that probably is going to trump a look at the outside of the house. I think that's going to be very disturbing. It's going to give feelings of extreme anger to the people watching it. When I saw fairly recently images of Mo Wilson in court, half naked with horrible wounds. In some ways, they were very slight wounds, the appearance of just a small little hole over here. Just a small little hole over here, but it's actually a bullet that's gone straight through this person's body. Very, very destructive. And in a way, it is, what's the word? It's deceptive how destructive it is, because you just see the small little dark red mark. But at the same time, you feel really, really angry. And you feel like someone was totally merciless, because she wasn't only shot once or twice, but 3 times. And you're going to get the same thing with the number of stab wounds that some of these victims have suffered. That is going to speak more volumes than anything else. That whoever did this was vicious and determined and wouldn't stop. And, right? Someone says it's incredibly abnormal for a crime scene to be destroyed prior to a trial. Well, think about the Ramsey home. I think the Ramsey home was sold even before it went to trial. I agree with you that it is abnormal, but I think this is also an abnormal case. This is not just, and I think part of what's made this abnormal is also social media. And I think that's a conversation nobody wants to have. Nobody wants to have the conversation of, if this case wasn't so high profile, if there weren't photos of the house, if there weren't photos of the blood coming out, by the walls, would this even be necessary? And that's why I think there's a little bit of tone deafness going on. Okay, so anyway, let me go through 5 points that I think are worth considering. And I think I've got an unusual interpretation. I think most of you will probably say, I disagree, and I think that's unusual and abnormal. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm unusual and abnormal, and you guys are usual and normal. Maybe it's the other way around. You guys can decide. You guys can decide. But whatever the answer, the question remains, am I being sensitive and you guys are not being sensitive enough? Or are you guys being sensitive and I'm not being sensitive enough? Is this about a lack of sensitivity on my part, or possibly a lack of sensitivity on your part? I think it's a worthwhile question to ask, because that's really what this is about. And I'm weighing in on this because I really thought about it when I was there. That's why I'm talking about it now, right? I think it's an important conversation to have. I think it's one of the meaningful conversations you can have about this case right now that is potentially helpful to true crime, because it's important that we look at ourselves critically as well. So let's start with this. It's not visible. Paxcule says, who does the house belong to? I will touch on that in a second. Okay, let's go to some of these images. Okay, it's not visible. In a recent episode of Banfield, Brian Enton and Ashley Banfield discussed the visibility of the house. I can tell you, having been there, it's extremely visible. I think you can tell how visible it is even if you've never been there. It's very easy to see from many vantage points far away. It's because it's so visible, likely that this crime happened. But it's also the same reason driving the powers that be to get rid of it. It's too hard to miss, even if you're not trying to see it, right? And that is, someone was saying it's very unusual to get rid of a crime scene. Well, this is quite an unusual crime scene because it's so visible. because it's so visible. Number two, what's the rush? What's the rush? So if you take what I've just said now, that it's not very visible, I think that's an insensitive thing to say, because it's not very perceptually accurate, because the house is extremely visible. I don't think you need to have like eagle-eyed vision to see the house easily from lots of different perspectives. So I would say you're being a little bit more sensitive if you say, yes, the house is actually very visible. It is very visible. Then if you say, what's the rush? Is that being sensitive? What's the rush? What's the rush? Why should there be a rush to get rid of this house? What's the rush? Are you thinking about anybody else? Are you thinking about anybody else when you say something like that? That's so true. Well, somebody thinks that there does need to be a little bit of a rush after leaving it standing for a whole year. And the rush is to be sensitive to the next group of kids who come to that area. It's for their benefit. It's to be sensitive to them. And if you ask me, it's the opposite. As early as February 2023, barely 6 months after the incident, the owners of 1122 King Road gave the property to the university. And I think that's quite something. The owners didn't say, we want to keep the house at all costs. We insist on continuing. They said, take the house within 6 months. And the university had the prerogative then in February of this year to demolish the house, and they didn't. And they did all sorts of other things. For example, they had the house cleaned out and emptied out and so on. And so it's kind of an ironic thing to say, what's the rush? Because the university hasn't been in a rush. So it's a little bit of a strange thing to say, what's the rush, when it's more than a year later. They could have demolished the house, and they didn't since February 2023. They waited. And I think what they were waiting for was for the trial to get going and for the house to be used and visited the way it was supposed to be. But the trial never really got going. Why didn't it get going? They were given a chance. A full year has gone by when this case could have been heard in court. Why wasn't it? What's the rush? What's the rush to hear the case? Well, there should have been a bit of a rush. There was a lot of bickering about media access, which delayed the trial. That's what caused the delay, not them saying, no, we want to demolish the house, and that was the thing. No, media access. That was one of the things that people bickered about. Can you remember what most of the motions were about this year? Can you remember what, like, all of these different motions were about that sort of ended up using up the entire year, and then the trial ultimately wasn't heard this year? Richardson says, it's been over 1 year. Why not hold on to it a bit longer? Because to hold on to it a bit longer would mean when the students arrive in less than a month, it's going to still be there, and it's for their benefit. That's the answer. Perry says, no one's losing anything by having it left as it is for now. Actually, someone is going to be losing. The kids who must live there and deal with the sideshow that this house kind of brings about. So I don't know what would you say, like, can you name all of the motions that were taking place that sort of sucked up a year of potential trial time, and essentially there was no trial this year. There was a grand jury thing, and then nothing. Think about it. There are many opposed to the house still standing, and yet it has stood. You might say, I don't want them to demolish the house, but there are a lot of people who live there that do, and yet the house still stands. It stood all year while the rusty wheels of justice basically ground to a halt. So I really don't think one can say there's a rush to get rid of the house. It feels like the university did all they could to allow the court to use the house, but the court bided, is that the word, its time. Let me put that, thanks a lot, Robbie Robin. Let me put that up so that you guys can read it. Doesn't it seem like the university did say, guys, here's the house, let's get this done. And it was the court who took a really long time to get its act together. Someone says, law officers of Andrew D. Meyer says, what do they do if unforeseen issues arise at trial? Well, I'm going to deal with that. Like, the other question is, do you think unforeseen issues are going to arise? Now we are about to face the start of the next college year. That's the reason why there's this rush, because it's to get rid of the house before the next college year. And the authorities, meaning the university authorities, have felt enough is enough. You guys have had your chance. We're not going to spoil it for another generation of students. We'd like to give them like a fresh start, I guess. That's who their priority is, the students. This is a student community. I've heard people say that they would never themselves stay in a house where a crime like this occurred. And this is where we try and make things a little bit personal. And let's try and be a little bit more sensitive. Let me ask you guys, how many of you would want to stay in that house? How many of you here want the house to stay standing? Say, would say, I wouldn't actually want to stay in the house myself. So if you wouldn't yourself stay in that house, would you want to stay next to it? If you say, I would never stay in that house, I wouldn't want my children to stay in that house, would you want to stay next to it? And that's what the university are cognizant of, is there might be some kids who also say, I actually don't want to go to that university because that's all they're talking about. I don't want to think about that during my fairy tale university experience. I don't want to deal with a nightmare in the middle of my fairy if I don't have to. And then who decides that they have to? I know Stephanie's got Stephanie is, I think one of her kids is about to go to university. If you could choose between this one and another one, would that factor at all into your decision making? Who would want to study in a house nearby or in a neighborhood or a college where a huge black cloud of sensationalism constantly hovers over your fairy tale? It's not just the house. It's the fact that reporters are coming there constantly. It's constantly on social media. It's been trending on social media constantly. And in the middle of looking at, oh, wow, the Vandals won this game. Oh, wow, when is the next Vandals game? Oh, Idaho 4. Brian Koberger, right? All of that, and you're seeing pictures of where you are going to college. It's got nothing to do with your enjoyable college experience. It's all to do with some horrible thing that happened to someone. Okay, and so that brings us to the third point, Ouroboros reasoning. Ouroboros. Is that what's going on here? I wager if the Idaho 4 case didn't become a high-profile case, if you didn't see photos like this, that took you right inside the house, if reporters didn't take photos of the house would still be standing. In other words, if the house was granted a certain degree of anonymity by the media and by social media, in other words, if the media were just not as intrusive as they have been, the house there wouldn't be an issue, it wouldn't be a problem. And only a small group of folks would know where it is and what happened in it, and it wouldn't really be an issue. And this is what's so ironic, is what the media and social media have participated in is literally branding images like this into the collective zeitgeist, not only in Idaho, not only in the state of Idaho, not only in Moscow, Idaho, but in America, right? Let me put that up. This is what we're talking about. Branding images of a particular house and a particular incident while you are a student in another house. Do you think that's going to be healthy for your student experience? Do you think it's going to be healthy for the way that you're going to go into the world, having this as this sort of backdrop to that? Can you remember in the movie Avatar, somebody said this?
We will blast a crater in their racial memory so...
Does that ring a bell? Could you guys hear that? Can you remember there was a colonel in the movie Avatar?
Blast your way in.
Sorry about that.
And a non-profit.
Can you remember there was a colonel in Avatar who said something like that? And what he was basically saying was, what we're going to do is we're going to destroy something at the heart of this community. These are his words. He says, we are going to blast a crater in their racial memory so deep that they won't come within 1,000 clicks of this place ever again, right? And that was all within the narrative of Avatar, where they were saying, we're going to do something to this community that's going to be so damaging to them, so psychologically devastating, that they're going to leave their own homes. They're never going to come close to this place again, right? And so what I'm trying to say is, what the media and social media are achieving is exactly the same thing, except it's not with some alien species, it's with fellow Americans. I'm not sure why that. Do you follow what I'm saying? And so in a real sense, the media have worked hand in hand with the quadrupling knifer, the quadruple knife murderer, to terrorize the Moscow community, especially while he was still at large. Remember, he was made more monstrous than he really was. He was called many times a serial killer while he was still on the run, while criticizing law enforcement as toothless and inept. And I don't know if you remember that period where we were still looking for the murderer, and he was made out to be a serial killer even after he was captured. And you kind of had the sense that some of the students hadn't left Moscow, they were still staying there. And on the one hand, social media was saying the police are useless, and this killer is he going to strike again, and all of that kind of thing. In other words, terrorizing that community. Do you want to go and live there? Meanwhile, the law enforcement were doing their jobs, they were on his trail, and they were finding him, and he wasn't a serial killer. But what you're doing is you are terrorizing a community. not based on truth or reality either. Wow, I see we've got a hater here. I see we've definitely got a hater here. How can a sane person blame the media for terrorizing the community? Okay, so I'm insane. I'm insane, okay. Okay, and so that takes us to the next point. Re-victimizing is real. This live stream is about sensitivity. Are we being sensitive enough to this community? Or are we doing what we think serves our community, which is the true crime community? What does Stephanie say? Yeah. That does make a statement, and that is also important. Can you imagine if Ethan's parents said, "We're taking you out of this university"? It's a credit to them that they continued studying there. I'm not sure if they finished, but that they continued studying there. So this is an excerpt from the university memo for those who care. For those who care. And this was, I think this came from February. This is what they said in February of this year. This is a healing step and removes the physical structure where the crime that shook our community was committed. Demolition also removes efforts to further sensationalize. And so that is exactly what the university was worried about in February. And so the university was saying, we want to get rid of the physical structure for a couple of reasons, because we want our community to heal. We want to get rid of the physical thing that is drawing in this negative publicity that is continuing to shake our community, disturb our community, upset our community, unsettle our community, traumatize our community. And the demolition removes the efforts. We're trying to say that by getting rid of the structure, the sensationalizing of this crime is being limited or inhibited. And that is actually why I would say, in a way, the crime itself may not have been as traumatic as the sensationalizing of that crime. And I think that's just a huge statement to make. Let me say that again. The crime itself, as horrible and traumatic and terrible as it was, 4 students knifed to death, may not have been as traumatic or traumatizing as what the media and social media have done to sensationalize this case for like a year back to back to back to back. And there was a point where I was covering this trial a lot, and then I just stopped because I felt that's what it's doing. I mean, if you go through my videos, when last did I cover this case? Even when I was in Moscow, when I went there to take photos myself, I didn't like do a live that night and show the pictures that I did because I was so conscious of it then. This was months ago. In fact, I was not sure if I even wanted to go to Moscow. I was covering the trial in Boise, and I thought, because that's when they were talking about it, and I thought, I don't want to be part of this trauma. And I was even having thoughts about stopping true crime completely at that point. And then I thought of it a different way. And I thought, what if you can be a voice that talks about this case in a different way? And that's kind of what I'm doing now. And I realize it's not good business for my channel. I realize I'm not going to make me popular. I'm not going to get great super chats not telling you what many of you want to hear. I understand that. Did you see others when viewing the house? Yes, I did. Someone says, I think in order to heal, justice is most important. That's a good point, because justice is part of the recipe in healing, but it's not the only part. It's not the only part. And justice can sometimes take quite a long time to occur. So I'm not, as I say, I'm not sure what shook the community more, the crime or the undying efforts to sensationalize it. There's a YouTuber who isn't even from America, who even after a year, and with nothing happening in the legal landscape, nothing even happening in the media landscape, has been posting videos twice a day criticizing efforts to prosecute the case from every possible perspective. And so I wonder if the university actually said to the true crime community, if the university kind of did a press conference right now, and they said to the true crime community, if you guys stop sensationalizing this case, we will agree to wait. Imagine if that happened like right now. The university said, true crime, this is we're talking to you right now. If you stop sensationalizing this case, we'll agree to wait till the trial. What do you think would happen? Do you think the true crime community would say, okay, we'll back off? Do you think they would do that? If the media was asked the same question, right? In other words, we want justice in this case. We're desperate for justice in this case. That's why we're covering it. Okay, well, if you want justice in this case, if you stop sensationalizing the case, that's what we want, the university. Will you help us, and then we'll leave the house there? What do you think the media and social media would say to that? What do you think they would say? Like, you guys want justice, right? Yes, we want justice. You guys want this house so that it can assure that justice happens. Yes. Well, we also want something, and that is we want to try and protect the people that live here. So if you meet us halfway, we'll meet you guys halfway. Will you agree to stop? No. Do you think they will? Do you think they will? I don't think they will. I've been quite critical of one side of the spectrum, and now I'm going to kind of criticize another side. Yeah, no, they would scream freedom of speech. They would. I'm just saying, out of manners, out of courtesy, out of the greater good, out of being asked, quid pro quo, this is important to us, this is important to you, what would you do? I don't think they would be very reasonable. But this is the part where I think the university are a little bit naive. They said, in his memo, the University of Idaho President Scott Green said the school will never forget the victims. Now, I visited Moscow and the campus, and I didn't get a real sense that there was an effort to remember the victims. If there was, I missed it. And the same applies to, I went to the Manon High Bridge in Delphi, and I thought I was going to see all sorts of memorabilia for the victims there, and I didn't see anything. Nothing, nowhere. I didn't see anything. I didn't see a bench with Abby and Libby's name on it. I didn't see a single flower. When I went to Boulder and I ate at the I ate at Pastor Jay's in, I think, Pearl Street. I asked people around me, what do you think of the John? And they were like, I don't know about the John Benet Ramsey case. And I was really astonished. I was in America, in the neighborhoods of some of these crimes, and people didn't even know about them. And so people had forgotten about them. People had forgotten about these cases, right? And what I'm trying to say is it does seem like forgetting is part of how people think you're going to heal. But there's another way to heal, and one of them is you learn the lesson. One of the lessons is don't make your home so visible. Another one is have cameras around your home, have better security. That's another way to heal and to protect other people. Learn those lessons. Although it's true and fair that we don't want to sensationalize and re-victimize, it's also true and fair that forgetting isn't the answer either. And forgetting is something that the true crime community do quite well as well, right? Forgetting is something the true crime community do pretty well as well. I've just covered the Gaynor Lord case. I kind of always makes me think of the one movie. And it seems like my community and the media are ready to move on from that case. And I feel like there's a lot more to talk about that no one's talking about. And I will predict that that case will go like this, like that, and then nothing, because there seems to be nothing in it for the whole true crime thing if there's not a foul play narrative. Oh, so the murder of oneself doesn't involve a motive, doesn't involve evidence, isn't even worse than the murder of somebody else. We're just not going to talk about that. And so that I think is a serious problem in true crime and with all of us, is that we forget about things when it suits us. What else? So this is the point I want to make. Part of healing and closure is also justice, as somebody mentioned. And I totally agree with that. You don't just say, whatever happens, happens. It's very important in this case, in terms of the healing of this community, is that there is justice, that someone is convicted or acquitted, but there's some kind of legal result, and then that is justice. And when I was in Texas, and I mean, I never thought that the murder of Mo Wilson was ever in any doubt. I thought of it as an indefensible case, and the defense ultimately was laughable in that case. It was laughable. It was pathetic for such a high-powered defense team. The defense, the narrative they came up with, I thought was lousy. A lot of money spent on not a terribly effective defense, right? And so when the verdict came, it only took 2 hours, barely, for the jury to come back with a guilty verdict. That wasn't a surprise. I didn't think it would take long for them to decide, and they didn't take long. I didn't think they would struggle to see that Caitlin Armstrong was guilty, and they didn't struggle. And there was a sense of sad closure, that this has now sort of been settled, and I've now completed my coverage of the Mo Wilson case. And part of that was the verdict, but it's also not necessary to continue covering that. We'll remember Mo Wilson, but it's also not necessary to just keep rehashing it. But there definitely is closure in a verdict and a sentence. There definitely is closure. But then there's also the appeal. And then there's not closure if there is an appeal. It's not as cut and dried as there's a verdict and then it's over. What if Brian Koberger appeals? Should the House then stand again? What if Brian Koberger wins and the state appeals? Should the House then continue to stand? I don't think that's going to happen here. Part of healing and closure is justice, but I would remind the true crime community that sensationalizing achieves neither. Sensationalizing a crime doesn't help healing, and it doesn't help closure. In fact, it makes closure that much more difficult. Sensationalizing probably undermines efforts at healing and closure. Telling the truth. So what helps healing for a community? Let's hear it from you guys. What would you say, besides a verdict, helps a community get the closure that they need? Someone says, why is this trial delaying so much? Pretty much, I would say the answer is because it's a high-profile case. There's a lot of nitpicking. There's a lot of people that aren't central to the case that want their interests heard, such as the media and other people. And otherwise, I think it would have been covered a long time ago. So it's because it's so high profile. Chelsea says time. Okay, so this is someone says, I don't know how to stop the pain. Well, listen to this. Telling the truth, being real, being genuinely committed to the society on the ground, going there, being there, understanding interests beyond your own. Those are all parts of the other side of the coin when it comes to healing that tear through community, through a community. My sense, before we knew who Brian Koberger was, before he was caught, very early on, was that whoever committed this crime chose a knife, did what he did because he wanted to tear a hole through the fabric of the society. And guess what? He has succeeded. He wanted to sensationalize his own crime. Guess what? He succeeded. Jean Karras, good to see you here. Look at what I'm saying. Telling the truth, and I'm talking to some extent to true crime creators and the media, telling the truth helps people heal. In other words, you don't exaggerate or minimize. You don't sensationalize or fictionalize or dramatize unnecessarily. You just simply report what the evidence is in an unbiased, unambiguous, real way. And simply being real about reality is going to help people heal. Oh, is that what happened? Without the drama. The drama might be good for the true crime community who are not part of this community, but it's really not good for the students who live there. Being real is saying what really happened here, not what probably didn't happen. Is this person a serial killer? Did he have an accomplice? Are there several people involved? Is it some kind of gang? No, none of those things. Let's be real about it. That'll help people to heal. Being genuinely committed to the society, I must say, when I went to Moscow, I thought it's not good for them, you being here. And when I was there, I got up early. I got up before dawn, and I walked through the streets because I didn't want to what's the word? I wanted to respect their privacy, and I wanted my privacy to be respected, right? But I can also say that I am committed to that society in a real and genuine way. And I felt that commitment when I was there, and students walked past me, and I felt embarrassed. I felt that I could understand that they just want to have an innocent experience. And should this be permanent innocence lost for the people who are there? Is there some way that we can protect their interests while pursuing justice? And I think there is an answer to that, and that is let this structure stand for a certain amount of time. And if it's still traumatizing people, well, then get rid of it. I see a lot of people online who could give a shit about other communities. Seriously. It's ironic because true crime to me seems to be all about caring about someone else. Let me say that again. True crime to me seems to be, or it should be, about caring about other people. This person in that place got hurt, died, something terrible happened. I care about that. Okay, that's good. It's a good thing that you care. It's a good thing that you're paying attention. But is that really what's going on? Because it often seems to be about projecting oneself into someone else's drama and voyeuristically dealing with things from your own life through some other schema. This then involves a circus of blaming the evil perpetrator and identifying with an innocent victim in a cycle of self-rationalizing that often has very little to do with the facts. It often has very little to do with the details or the subtleties of a case or of the people themselves. and everything to do with trying to feel better about ourselves and getting a handle on our anxieties. And I'm the first person to say there is a real way that true crime can help people, right? In other words, you can study a true crime case and find out insights about yourself and your own life. There's definitely an aspect to that is part of true crime, and it can be incredibly meaningful. But what I see happening so often is that gets placed front and center instead of on the other side. In other words, and I did this with the Caitlin Armstrong case. Once the verdict was found, once the case was settled, you can then do all the projecting in the world that you want to do. You can do all the intuitive gymnastics you want to do, where you say, I understand that because this is what I went through. There's a time to do that. It's not at the beginning of the case, it's at the end of the case. In other words, start by getting yourself out of the way and getting into the shoes of the people involved. You start that way. You don't start by putting yourself in front of all of these people. It's going to take a long time to get to know these people. At the end of that process, you can say, how did getting to know these people help me get to know myself? And I see it happening with true crime constantly, that you start the process by saying, oh, this is how I felt about that. Oh, this reminded me of no. If you did that in a courtroom, and that was what Depp versus Heard was all about, was, oh, I feel for that person because I like him. I feel for that person. That's got nothing to do with the merits of the legal case, right? If you want to prosecute a case or defend a case, then you do it scientifically with all the evidence that there is in the case itself, right? And you have all the time in the world to come afterwards and say, you know what, this is how it made me feel. But we've got it backwards in the true crime community, where we say, how do I feel about this first and foremost? Forget about really the legal realities here. How do I feel about it? And really what's important here is the greater good and the legal merits, and then really what you feel about it. You are part of the greater good, but you're not part of the greater good in terms of Moscow. I'm part of the greater good, but as someone who's not even an American citizen, I'm even less part of the greater good in terms of the story. I recognize that. Do you recognize it? So murderers do what they do because they can't get over themselves. This is quite important to say. People who commit crimes commit them because they feel something I'm not very happy about, and so I'm going to force the issue. I'm going to force things to turn out a certain way, right? Let me say that again. Murderers do what they do because they can't get over themselves or what they want. And so we need to be better than that. People in society need to put themselves aside and the interests of the greater good first, or risk murdering a wounded community all over again in the name of rightness. We're almost at the 2-hour point, and for me, this is the bottom line. I don't think the case, the Idaho 4 case, is rocket science. I don't think it's going to be very hard to prove who committed this crime. I don't think with all the just the media footage alone of the outside of the house has given me a very clear idea of what the house looks like. There's been drone footage from every conceivable angle. There's been just before I came online, I actually saw a virtual tour where you could literally go through it yourself online. Gives you quite a good idea. Like the murder of Mo Wilson, I don't think it's a case that is like a tightrope walk. In the Mo Wilson case, the prosecutor said there's been so much evidence in this case. I haven't seen anything like it in whatever 20 or 30 years. And the evidence was incredible. The amount of GPS data of the vehicle, and that's the vehicle going there once, the vehicle going there once and the vehicle leaving once. In this case, we've got the vehicle going there 12 times and then 4 times on the night of the incident. I mean, what's so absurd about this case compared to that case is that that's a case where one person was killed and the person used a firearm and they left behind the bullets, right? The projectiles, and they left behind, what's the word? They left behind DNA, and they left behind their vehicle going by about twice or 3 times. This case has got all of that evidence times 100, maybe not that much, but times 10 or times 20. It's got a lot of CCTV footage, which we haven't seen. We've seen some of it, but it's similar. You can't see the number plate, but you can kind of see the type of car and the time that the car's moving. In the same way with the Caitlin Armstrong case, which most of you guys didn't pay any attention to, you had her phone and her vehicle moving at the same time through space and time, in the same direction through space and time to a particular point, and then leaving that place at the same time. Also, in the Caitlin Armstrong case, you had the incredible thing, horrible but incredible, that a Ring camera actually recorded the incident. I'm talking about the audio of the incident. You could hear how many shots were fired. You could hear the victim screaming. You could hear the victim stop screaming. You could hear 2 shots fired, a pause, and then the 3rd shot fired. And we were later told she was shot twice in the face, a 3rd time through the chest, with the perpetrator standing over the victim. She was shot right through the chest, through the heart. And so what I'm trying to get at is, well, that was one person who was killed, and one is more than enough. One is not more than enough is the wrong way to put it. One is too many, one too many. In this case, you've got 4 people, right? In that case, you had someone following that person on social media. I'm talking about stalking them on social media, on Instagram, logging onto their Strava, I think 6 times or something like that on the day that that person was murdered. You've got the same kind of evidence here. So again, what I'm trying to say is, if you went to Texas like I did, or if you just followed the case and you look at the amount of evidence in that case and look at the amount of evidence in this case, DNA was left at the scene of that case. DNA was left at the scene of this case. The phone was moving, the phone was moving. The car was seen, the car was seen. And so on and so on and so on. And then you look also at the dynamics, right? Also, Koberger was found at like 1 o'clock in the morning, putting his DNA, putting his things that he touched in the home into little baggies. That's how they caught him when they caught him. He had, I think, nitrile gloves on or plastic gloves on, and that was what he was doing when he was apprehended. So my personal feeling is, all of this brouhaha about don't demolish the house because this case is going to be so difficult to prove. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me that this case is going to be difficult to prove? What's so difficult to prove about it? Where's the missing link? In the Caitlin Armstrong case, did they find the murder weapon? No, they didn't. They knew that this person owned that gun, which is different here. We don't know for a fact that Brian did. But the DNA is significant, that the phone data in this case is significant. The vehicle data is super significant. What's the problem? What is the problem in this case? So have we not seen the house that if you're not there yourself, you're not going to know what it looks like? And I'm not saying that that's not going to be helpful, but I'm saying if you take that away, the case isn't going to collapse like a house of cards. Are you kidding me? And then you ask the question about alibi. Does Brian Koberger have an alibi? Well, I tended to go driving at night very often. I must say it's actually an excellent alibi because it both accommodates what actually happened, but in a very weak way. Oh, so the night of the murder, you were actually out driving? Yes, I was. And what time did you come back? Oh, okay. And you had your phone with you? Oh, okay. It's a very, very weak alibi. And not only is it a weak alibi, the fact that he came up with it after months is extremely weak as well. How long did he take to come up with an alibi? A really, really long time. Is Brian Koberger gonna testify in his own defense? Caitlin Armstrong didn't. If he doesn't testify in his own defense, that's going to appear very weak as well. Well, no one saw Caitlin Armstrong. No one saw her. And I think there's a what's the word? There's a misunderstanding. That's really not the right word. There's a what is underestimated in true crime and in murder cases. It seems to me that people think you have to have the murder caught on video, like the actual murder on a screen, the person murdering the other person, in order to prove your case. And that's not the case. It's really not the case. An interesting question is, in the Murdoch case, if that Snapchat video wasn't taken, would he still have been convicted? And I have to say, I was totally wrong in that case. I thought the Snapchat video was of very dubious value. I thought that he was going to deny it, and I thought they were going to say, you can't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that that was his voice. And yet they accepted, without being able to see him, they accepted that it was his voice, and he admitted that it was him, and sorry, your case is gone. And in a case where you can say at this time, at this exact time, this is when the crime happened, then it's quite easy to say, at this exact time, where were you? And that was the problem with Caitlin Armstrong. Her vehicle left the scene 2 minutes after the murders, after those gunshots, right? We know exactly when the gunshots happened. We know when her vehicle started moving away. And her vehicle was in the area, same as Brian Koberger, for like an hour or more, circling the block and doing all sorts of things. And then suddenly after the crime, I don't need to be here anymore. Oh, that's interesting. In this case, you've also got ring footage, or I'm not sure if it's ring, but you've got footage that recorded the incident. And that tells us that tells us that law enforcement know at what time the incident started and at what time it ended. And then, Brian, where were you? We know you were driving around. Where were you at that time? Were you in Moscow? Ooh, oopsie. Where was your phone? Were you somewhere and your phone was somewhere else? Someone says, I wonder if there's security cameras outside his apartment that would show what he's wearing or carrying. Now, I must say, again, in the Caitlin Armstrong case, there were a couple of things that were revealed during the trial that I didn't know. I didn't know that they had recordings of the crime. That was a huge surprise. And I didn't know that her DNA was found at the crime scene. That was another huge surprise. And you may have huge surprises in this case as well, where you can see part of the license plate of the vehicle, or that you can see a figure going into the house or something. But there might be evidence that we haven't been privy to, even though we think we've been privy to. The public are not privy to literally everything. And of course, that doesn't even include the autopsy evidence and the inside of the crime scene evidence, the body cam, all that kind of thing. That was also shown during the Armstrong case, some of the body cam, this is what I saw when I came into the crime scene. That's very valuable and insightful compared to what we know. Yeah, I didn't know about that either. So that was a surprise that the prosecution had that kind of evidence. So let's do a quick poll. Without saying anyone's name, do you think this case is going to be hard to prosecute and hard to successfully prosecute? It's got nothing to do with the house being demolished or not. It's a simple question. Do you think when this case does go to trial that the prosecution are going to have their work cut out for them, that it's going to be some kind of epic legal battle to prove their case? Yes or no? Yes or no? Do you think this is going to be an epic legal battle where it's going to be like the O.J. Simpson trial, where it's so much going on this side, and one day it's like this? What do you guys say? So I see one person saying yes. Yeah, I see another person saying yes. And so those people have a legitimate reason to say, don't destroy the house. It's our only hope. But I think the rest of you, wouldn't you agree with me that it's not really needed? The case is more than strong enough that it's not really needed. And I would argue the following. I would argue that the university went to the prosecution, spoke to the prosecution and said, can we do this? Let me put it another way. If the prosecution felt without the house, we're going to lose, and whose side are you on, right? Whose side are you on? The prosecution side, the defense's side, or the side of justice, right? But irrespective of whatever you say there, if the prosecution went to the university, and I'm sure that they did, and the prosecution said, please, if you demolish this house now, we could lose this case. I don't think the university would say, sorry, we're going to demolish it anyway. I think the university asked them, is it okay? And what do you think the prosecution said? Not what you say, not what the true crime community say, not what the media say. What do you think the prosecution, knowing what their case was, said? Right? And if you doubt my reasoning, the other side of that is, who has gone back to the crime scene now? Who's gone back to the house now because maybe they feel like they don't have enough? Not the prosecution, the defense. Do you think the defense went there because they feel they've got enough, because they feel they don't have enough? And I think that's my strongest argument, is that the prosecution, knowing their case the way they do, probably have said, given permission, I'm assuming it's speculation, probably have said to the university, it's not ideal, but we should be fine. Do you agree? Thanks, Terry. Elise, going to rewind since I missed so much. Okay. Cheryl says, I never thought of that. That's what I'm here for, is to do some critical thinking on our behalf and bring us back to reality and bring us back to sensibility. And with that in mind, can we kind of give the new students kind of a better start than 2023 students? Yes. Okay, well, that's in everyone's interest. There we go. That's kind of my point. It's kind of my point. I must also say that although there's no one that respects this whole idea more than I do, that you need to preserve the fabric, you need to go back in time, you need to have all of that. I'm also the first person who will say one of my biggest criticisms of modern courtrooms is that they don't use digital what's the word? Equipment, but also digital footage enough. They spend so much time describing things when you could just say, look at this picture. Do you see that in the picture? Yes, you don't need any description. You don't need to waste time describing a scene when you can just show the scene. And I'm not saying that there's not a place for statements and descriptions. There is, but you can make a much stronger case by simply showing. And we've got things like body cam today, which we didn't have in the past. We can render scenes in a way that is so close to reality, it's not funny, that it is like being there. And I'm someone who stands for being authentic and real, right? And that's why I went there myself, and I experienced the scenes there as I did myself. But if I go there and I record certain things and I tell you, does that mean if you didn't go there, you would have no idea? Don't be silly. You know, I've heard that all the time. Like, if you weren't there, you'll never know. So ridiculous. If I go there and I perceptively record things, and I then come back and I show you what I perceptively recorded, well, it's not just as good as you being there yourself, but it's very close to just as good. Yeah, the defense went back, the prosecution didn't go back. That tells you a lot. Now, who knows? Maybe the prosecution will go back tomorrow. Who knows? But we know the prosecution did quite a lot of work in the early days. The defense came and went here and there. Okay, so let's have a look at some of your comments. Erin says they better have enough. Well, think about what they've got. DNA, a lot of cell phone evidence, which actually surprised me. Definitely you can say, although there's CCTV of a white vehicle, they can't say for sure exactly which vehicle, but they couldn't say that in the Caitlin Armstrong case either. They saw a white vehicle, they saw a vehicle that looked a certain way, but they couldn't see the license plate and they couldn't see who was driving it. But the same applies in that case as this case. Was Brian's vehicle parked in front of his apartment when this crime was committed? No. Well, a vehicle that looked like his was driving in the area. Was it his vehicle? Unfortunately, his phone seems to indicate it was, because where the vehicle was moving, his phone was moving. In Caitlin's case, where her vehicle was moving, his phone was moving. The one thing that is going to be a little bit trickier in this case is her vehicle had GPS tracking. I don't know whether Brian's will. In fact, I almost am quite sure that it doesn't. But what you can do is show the vehicle caught on camera and where the cell phone is at a particular time and see if those maps correspond. Some other comments. Yeah, that's also a really good observation. If you weren't guilty or feeling guilty, why were you behaving quite weirdly? Why did you take garbage out at the time that you did, and why were you doing what you were doing? Why did you change your number plate? Why did you change your license plate? The thing that I've felt quite troubled over in this particular case is like, I'm learning in the same space that you guys are. I'm fairly new to YouTube. I wouldn't say I'm a veteran and I wouldn't say I'm a newbie, but I'm fairly new to it. And I was shocked by the way certain media and social media just went on covering this case, even though there was a gag order. It's like, oh, there's a gag order, well, let's just ignore it. And some of these people are legal journalists. It's like, shouldn't we care about the integrity of this case? Because that's also part of it. If you care about the structure, shouldn't you also care about, you can jeopardize a case by playing it out in the media as well? And in that sense, you guys have quite an important role to play as well. Is you can say there's a gag order, there's a reason for a gag order besides protecting the trial, but what about protecting this community? I'm not really going to pay attention to coverage on this case because it's not the right thing. In other words, you guys can be part of the greater good, even though you're not from Moscow. You can say to a true crime creator that's covering future cases like this excessively, when there's a vulnerable community involved. I don't know if there will soon be one like this one, but and say, I don't think we should. I don't think we should be, and I'm kind of the last person who should be saying that we shouldn't be covering things that people are interested in, but under certain circumstances, yes. One of the areas that I think has been completely overlooked, and this is just my opinion, is bad Teachergate. Does anyone know what bad Teachergate is? And you, if you do know, do you agree? So I think I'm going to just be on for another 10 minutes, and then I'm going to call it a night for me, a day for you guys. Do you know? Sorry, this keyboard is slightly different to my other one, which is a slightly ergonomic keyboard. And because this one's flat, I kind of got to concentrate a bit more on looking at the keys. Terry says 100%. So if you think about this case and you say there were certain things driving the criminal psychology, that and that and that and that, you know, was the perpetrator struggling to make friends? Was the perpetrator bad at engaging with the opposite sex? And, you know, I actually feel like I'm not terribly good at the moment, but I'm 50-something. The issue is when you are 20-something, and if you're 20-something and everyone around you is getting laid and having girlfriends, then it's a much bigger deal, right? It's a much bigger deal when you are in college and everyone's partying and getting drunk and getting laid and you're not. And you haven't perhaps for far too long. That's going to be eating at you, right? And so what I'm trying to say is I think that's part of the operant criminal psychology, but what was the trigger? In other words, if that is undermining this person's sense of self, what's the thing that really pushes him over the edge? And in my opinion, I think a very big factor here is bad Teachergate. And bad Teachergate is a series of horrible, what's the word? A series of horrible incidents for the students and probably for the suspect here, where he felt insulted, undermined, disrespected, humiliated, embarrassed, all those things. And also it was like a social death for him, where he, in this setting, he was totally humiliated. Yeah, that's exactly it. He was humiliated. And so this social death in Pullman probably made him feel like Pullman is a write-off. No one likes me in Pullman. I'm not going to get a girlfriend in Pullman. Let me go somewhere else. And then how much worse is it when you've gone somewhere else and people then don't accept you either for whatever reason? You just can't, no matter what you try and do, you just can't break through that social death. You just can't, what's the word? Make yourself acceptable in someone else's view of you. And it starts to become a huge crisis that you can't stop obsessing over. And then you feel like someone specific is to blame for your misery. Someone who's getting their fairy tale seems to be getting it at your expense. If only they could just extend a hand to you, your life could just turn on a dime and you would have your happily ever after. But it just doesn't happen. And so what pushes the criminal psychology past the point of no return? Wasn't it bad Teachergate? And then he reaches out to someone in Moscow and then in some way is humiliated yet again. In some way is not found, is found wanting yet again. What must I do just to get a little bit of love in this world, right? That's the kind of feeling that's going on. Thanks a lot, Alison. Thank you. Well, someone from the UK, appreciate that. That's right. That's right. Now, why is he hanging out there? Well, because he's not feeling comfortable or accepted or loved. And that's so important for someone in their 20s. When everyone else is having the time of their lives, I'm not. That's a big deal. Lawn Chair Detective, good to see you. Sorry, that cracks me up. Is there anyone here that doesn't know about bad Teachergate? And I must say, I feel like I didn't do my work, because if I did, bad Teachergate would be on everyone's lips now. And I think that should be a big part of the prosecution's case. They'll probably call it something else, but I really think that that's one of the strongest arguments in terms of the dynamics, because the social dynamics are a very important part of every true crime case, goes to motive. And if I'd done my job, it would be on everyone's lips and it would be top of mind. But as many of you know, I did step away from this case for quite a while. Yeah, I wonder if I can find a few videos for you guys that I did on bad Teachergate. There are quite a few. Let's just see if I can find them. Search your channel. It's bad teacher. See if I can find a couple. Mods, can you guys also have a look while I'm doing this? I can't really see too many here. Maybe if I use Google. Bad Teachergate. Here's one. What triggered Koberger? I think that's one of them. Yeah, so if you go to the playlist and you just go through it step by step, you'll eventually get to bad Teachergate. This was the trigger. I think that's another one. This was the trigger. Sorry, I'm just trying to find, actually quite bad that I can't find it quicker than I can, but anyway, there's one of them. These videos are kind of under the title, What Triggered Him. So that's one. This is another one. So I'm going to just do a Google search. Should come up that way. Kohberger. So all of these videos deal with bad Teachergate. I'm still not seeing the one that I'm really looking for. Let's just try bad Teachergate, Kohberger, true crime, rocket science. Still don't see it. It's obviously not the best, what do you call it? It's not the best naming of videos and keywords. But I know I've got a picture from the movie that's in the title of one of the videos. I'm just trying to look for it. See if we can find it. I can't believe I can't find it. Just give me another few seconds. Let's try a search on just Idaho. 119 videos. It's also under one of the clues we all missed. Let's just see if I can find the actual one I'm looking for. There it is. The number 8 clue we all missed is bad Teachergate. I can see now why I didn't
Step into Wix Studio.
name it, because that would be giving it away. So that's bad. This video is all about bad Teachergate. Sorry about spending a bit of time zoning out like that, but there you have it. So this video is the bad Teachergate video, the number 8 clue I think we all missed. Okay, so thanks a lot, guys, for being here. I was actually quite surprised seeing more than 500 people in chat. So thanks a lot for being here. Someone says, why do you criticize other RC creators? What are RC creators? RC. Don't you mean TC creators? Well, if you're saying criticizing someone for saying Kohberger is a serial killer is the same as saying bad Teachergate is speculative. Bad Teachergate we know happened. So in other words, we know we had these incidents and we know how close they were to the actual fabric of the crime. So in other words, what I'm saying is based on reality, whereas this is based on, like, there's no evidence that he's a serial killer. You can't say the fact that he's a serial killer is based on the fact that he killed 4 people. First of all, he's not been convicted, and secondly, there hasn't been any proof whatsoever that he's a serial killer. So that like it's not the same level of speculation. Some speculation is totally unfounded and some speculation is totally founded. I'll give you another example, and some of you will disagree with me. Saying Shannon Gilbert is a likely victim of Rex Human is totally unfounded. And that's not just speculation, that is based on listening to all of the evidence and being sensible, right? Saying that Asa Ellerup is a likely accessory is totally unfounded. And you can say, well, they found evidence of her hair. Well, that's all the evidence they found. And you can't make an entire case against someone. There are many cases like the Ramsey cases where they found evidence of the Ramseys in certain aspects of the crime scene. Yeah, well, they lived there. You can't turn an entire case into a DNA case. So that's the difference. That's the difference. And it is frustrating to me when people say your speculation is equal to everyone else's. For example, in the Kylie Rodney case, it's not equal. But you're welcome to your opinion to say, no, I don't think it is equal. I'm going to stay with this other channel. Well, then do that. I understand that it's not what you want to hear, but I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. I'm not here to entertain you. I am here to try and bring more humanity to the true crime space, which I don't think it's like a game to a lot of people. I was watching just for a short space of time another creator, and it's almost like entertainment for a lot of people. Make squeaky voices, do this with your eyes, smile, whatever. That's not really what, to me, I try and treat true crime like prosecuting a case in a courtroom. And that's quite serious. If you've ever been to a courtroom, you don't make jokes there, your phone doesn't ring. You must know your place in a courtroom. Somebody died, and that's not a joke to the person who's on trial or to the person who is related to the victim. It's not a joke. But I do get that there are people who want true crime to be fun and entertaining, and then don't come here. I'm not saying it must all be, we say in Afrikaans, snot and trane, which means snot and tears. It doesn't have to all be serious and sad, but I do think it needs to be grounded in reality at least. And as soon as you start becoming flippant, then like there are places on YouTube for flippancy, watching cats do funny things and celebrity news. YouTube's got lots of places for flippancy. I just don't think it belongs in true crime, but I understand that some people feel that it should. I don't. That's why I say I would like to be an authentic voice in true crime, not what's the word, a silly, funny voice. I don't put like a Christmas hat on myself when I do. I'm not here to charm you. I'm here to demonstrate critical thinking, I hope. I mean, I think there might be times when I don't. I mean, I think when I did my video yesterday on Gay nor Lord, where I was very confident of my case, the proper way to have dealt with that would have been to wait a little bit longer for the autopsy results, because I could have been wrong. I was very confident about what I was saying, but the proper way would have been to restrain myself a little longer and then said, this is what we thought, and it has been confirmed by the evidence. And that's kind of how I feel. You don't need to sugarcoat or exaggerate or fictionalize or dramatize or sensationalize, because all of this stuff is shocking enough as it is. It's enough. The thing that is missing is we don't know exactly what happened, but you figure that out not by being silly, but by being serious. Is there anyone here who wants me to show a little bit of the footage I took in Moscow? or do you guys want to go to bed or go and eat something? Okay, so let me just have a look at what I've got here. So just a couple of random images from the area. What's going on here? Close. So that is a picture from that arboretum that's just around the corner from the house. And I actually thought when I was going there, I was going to find some kind of memorial, some kind of garden, maybe some thing has been erected since I was there, but you would think you would have seen it by now somewhere, some kind of garden-like memorial in that arboretum. And I kind of thought I would find that there, but it wasn't there when I was there. If you walk to the top of that garden, that's where you see the tower. And so it's literally, if you walk up, you get to the tower, and if you just went at a slightly different angle down, you would get to 1122 King Road. And that's how close this peaceful spot is to the crime scene. So this is literally just around the corner from 1122 King Road is down there. The water tower would be at my back in terms of this image. I'm trying to remember where this fits into the fabric. But this is also where you got a real sense of the student community. I went in here, this is actually where I ate when I was in Moscow, and kids that were students served me, and I kind of wanted to ask them about the IDAHO 4 case, and I just didn't, because that it seemed like it didn't seem appropriate. And that was also an interesting experience I had very close to the crime scene, where you interacting with students and you're thinking, I don't think they really want to talk about this, especially to people who aren't from here. Can you guys remember what relevance this had to the crime? The All-American food. Yeah, that's it. I think when I was on my way here, there was a bunch of students saying, honk if you wanted, something like honk, or everyone who honks must drink, or something like that. And so if you honked your vehicle as you went by, you'd have to stop, and then they would give you a drink. And there was like 20 of them. This is also around the corner from the house, and it just gives you an idea of what they are doing and thinking, and how much fun they are trying to have when you lurking in the area. I think there were also kids playing table tennis outside, very close to the house, and you hear music playing, and you hear, in other words, there's an atmosphere there, and you hear laughter, and you look up on a balcony, and there's kids drinking as well. This was on a Saturday or a Sunday, and then you drive all the way to Pullman, to Brian's apartment. It's just dead. Nothing's happening there. No one's laughing. And you kind of got the idea that there are a lot of families and not young kids, and that's also why he left there to go somewhere else, if on a weekend or whatever. Remember, he was far from home. This is actually where I stayed. What's this? So I stayed at this Fairbridge Inn. I think this was like, there was no place to stay in Moscow when I went there, because there was a jazz festival going on. And so I'd stayed in this hotel, and it was like, literally, there were like 2 rooms left in the whole of Moscow. I just recorded that because it's quite a funny name, Stinker Stores. And there you see a jazz fest. So that was when I was in Moscow between those dates. And a kind of a weird thought occurred to me when I was there was, why don't I take part in this cultural event? Why don't I attend a part of this jazz festival? And the answer was, I'm not really into jazz. I wouldn't say I hate jazz, but I'm not, if a band was playing that I liked, maybe I would have gone. But like if Taylor Swift was there, I probably would have gone. I would have tried to get in, put it that way. And this is just a digital display that was round the corner from my hotel. And look what they're saying here, mental health walk, May 11, 10:30, Friendship Square, self-care, be aware. And this is what they are thinking about in Moscow, mental health. Do you think the sensationalizing of this crime helps with that? Community strength and healing. That's what's on the display, again, around the corner from my hotel. This is what I'm talking about, is that shouldn't we be sensitive to that? So I just found the landscape quite strange around between Moscow and Pullman. It's just a strange undulating landscape, almost like a green sea. And I just wondered, because it's such a strange landscape, and there's a reason for it because of the geography and the geology. I think it's some very old mountains. I'm not quite sure now, but if I wrote a book about it, I would have touched on it. And it makes you wonder whether Brian Koberger was reminded of the hills that he grew up in Pennsylvania. And I don't know, I found the mountains kind of disorienting because it's not like flat and it's not mountainous, it's kind of somewhere in between. And so it almost feels like you're adrift at sea driving through this landscape. You don't often get landscapes that are just hills and hills and hills like that. South Korea is a little bit like that. But it just made me wonder whether this didn't aggravate this psychology of being lost and not belonging, because driving over these roads is also constantly up and down and kind of taking turns. It's not a straight road. It just made me wonder whether that's relevant to the psychology in a kind of a different way. You guys want to see some more photos? So this was getting up early in the morning. Let's just see if I can look at the metadata here. This was 7:04 on a Saturday, the 22nd of April. So it was quite early in the morning. This is central Moscow. That is the Mad Greek restaurant. And I wanted to actually go into the Mad Greek restaurant. I wanted to eat something, but don't laugh when I say this. I sort of felt like I don't want to go in there by myself. I kind of want to go and ask questions. I kind of want to go in there as a proper patron. I want to go in there with someone, and someone had actually said that they would. Someone from the TCRS community had said much earlier, if you're in town, I'll show you around. We can eat at the Mad, and that's what I thought we were going to do. And then when the time came, not quite sure what happened. I think they'd gone home or they were somewhere else. But I didn't really want to go there as a investigator. I wanted to go there just as a normal person, not take any photos, not ask any questions, just experience being in the restaurant, get the vibe, get the feeling of what it was like there for the people who were there. And I don't know if you can see in the corner there. Can you see over there where the cursor is? There's a little bit of a memorial for the victims. There's a little bit of a memorial that's out there. Can you see it says Ethan, Maddie, Kaylee over there? Can you see that? I think I've got a better photo. And part of going here was to see where the CCTV cameras were, and especially the ones that captured Maddie and Kaylee walking and saying something about Adam, I think. Did you tell Adam? And so I wanted to see exactly where's that CCTV camera. And also where was the bench, where was that point where this was taken? And so you can see there's a camera over here. There's a camera right over there. And the corner club is kind of down here. And I know it's silly to say this, but when you're in Moscow and you see branding of the university all over the place, and even if you've forgotten, you remember this is a university town. There's another flag with the eye on it, and whether if you even if you're conscious that this is a student community, but you forget about it, you keep being reminded, right? The students are the lifeblood of this town, and so if the students start deciding we don't want to be here anymore, it's traumatizing, it's unpleasant, it's not fun, an entire town can start struggling, and that's not good for anybody. The answer is because I think he was a big dumb male. Now, I'm not actually sure whether I've shown this footage before. I'm not sure if some of the photos I may have put in some videos, but I've never shown it this way. It really is, aside from the university, I mean, the university buildings are really quite pretty, but the town itself is very charming, very, very nice town. It's one of the nicest towns in America that I went to. I kind of thought about it afterwards. Would I have wanted to study at this university? And the answer is yes, but not with the long winters. It's a very nice place. I would have liked to have studied there, but if the winters weren't so long. So you can see the light is still on because it's pretty early in the morning still. And I kind of wanted a head start because if you go there and there are a lot of people around, it's tougher to observe things. And it's also a bit closer to the situation on Sunday morning. I was there on the early Saturday morning, but the crime happened. I'm just actually trying to remember. Wasn't it early Sunday morning? Just remind me, did this crime happen early Sunday morning, right? 4 in the morning on a Sunday morning. So as far as I know, this is the CCTV this is the actual CCTV that Yeah, early Sunday. Yeah. So I mean, I was there on a Saturday, but it's approximately um, a similar atmosphere. Basically, just the streets are deserted, people are nursing hangovers, they're still asleep, that kind of thing. It would be even quieter than it was when I was there. And I actually did the same thing when I went to Barry Morpheus Hotel. I just wanted to see where the camera was and just kind of get a better sense of everything. And there you get a sense now. The corner club is actually here. You can't quite see the sign, just out of sight here. I actually spoke to this lady with the dog. The corner club's just out of sight around the corner. Maddie and Kaylee walked down this stretch. I don't know if you remember that, and it was recorded with this camera. There's the bench over there, and that would have been the rest of their trip. Now, I often find it frustrating as a investigative person, as a photographer, that when the media goes somewhere, they take a photo and then that's it. They take some video and then that's it. And I sometimes want that kind of panning where you get the sense of the view from one side and the view to the other side. And I sometimes feel this is the photography I want to see, so I'm going to record it for you guys. So there's the corner club. Someone says, will you do a video or live on the disinformation? I'm not going to do that. I'm really just going to do this one video for now. Okay, next one. So this was standing right under the corner club sign. And there you can see, this is almost right by the corner club. You can actually see the tower here. That's how close the corner club is to the tower and the funhouse, the 1122 King Road. There again is a CCTV camera. Just a couple of other angles. Let's just see if we can see this a little bit better from this angle. Ethan, Maddie, Kaylee. I think I took a close-up shot of that. There it is. Justice for the Idaho 4 cardinals appear when angels are near. And so that is how the locals are remembering people that they knew with this sort of thing. Imagine that's lit up right now. Merry Christmas. And so this was going to the actual site. Obviously early in the morning again. Again, you can see how far away and actually how elevated this spot is to all of these surrounding houses. There's the water tower. There's the 1122 King Road. You can see again how high, much higher it is than all of this fabric of homes surrounding it. So it is actually very visible. It's also very visible if you're standing there. Wow, we're almost at the 3-hour mark. I really do need to wrap up. I think we'll end off with these photos from the night that I arrived in Moscow. I went straight to the house at night. So let's just do this. Let's do that. So this is coming into Moscow. That's the food mart where the workers sent a screenshot of the video, and you can see there's a camera over here. I think there's also a camera on this side as well, but this is the important camera. There it is. And here's a camera, and there's a car driving by, but that's not, as far as I know, that's not the road the vehicle was on. I think it's, as far as I know. So this is a photo at the behind King Road. The house is over here, and look how many vehicles are parked here. Look how many people, and this is just the one side. Look how many people must go by the house every single day on their way home to these apartments. This is kind of a view from, if you were standing over here and you turned around, this is kind of where I parked. If you turned around, then your view would be that way, right? And from this perspective, it's at night. Look at all these windows that are within sight of the house. Well, all of these homes can see this house. And bear in mind, the house is in darkness. It would normally be illuminated, like it is behind me. It would normally look like that, with these illuminated as well, right? It would look welcoming. It would look cute and quaint and sweet and like a fairy tale. And of course, it doesn't really look like that here. But in the time that Maddie and Kaylee and Ethan and Xana were in the house with the others, it would be very much a living thing, right? Also, look at this car parked right here. This is not my vehicle, someone else's vehicle. Looks like it's actually got some damage here. This vehicle parked right here. Look how close it is to the balcony. That's how close you can get to the balcony and still be in a vehicle. Look how around the road spins around or turns around right in front of the house over here. The crime scene tape is going over there, but the apron of road turns over here. All along the front of the house, you can get really close to the house, with basically at eye level with Maddie's bedroom, right? And now, how many of you have seen this perspective in any other photo? Well, what do you think? What do you think? Yeah, it is close. And so this was just walking along the house. Again, remember I said you could put your arm out around the tree trunk and lean over, and you could come very close to touching the balcony. That gives you, again, just a sense of how close you are to that balcony. And Maddie's bedroom is right there. And she would sometimes be on this balcony, perhaps during a party. There's the fraternity right over there. And the fact that you can see the fraternity means that they can see this house. There's the water tower. So obviously in darkness with these trees, it does have quite a haunting quality to it, which is not like what the house was like at the time. This is an unusual view. You don't see this view very often, but you can see there's a little bit of a platform here. Do you remember there was a ladder that was put out here? I think it may have been house at the time of the crimes, at the time the crime was committed. Remember, you saw a ladder on the outside? Well, was that where some of the students went to look through some of these windows? If they couldn't get into the house, did they do that? Again, look how exposed this house is to the views of other homes in the area. Look at all these windows that are facing this house. And that's just a black cat that I saw in the area. Okay. What else? Let's do this one. Let's end off with this one. This is Pullman. So this is what it looks and feels like on the other side, and I must say I found it very sterile and dead. This was over a weekend, but it felt very dull. Metadata shows this was at 5 to 6 or 7 minutes to 6 on April 22nd, the Saturday. So this was late afternoon on the same weekend. What's that? Sorry, I keep doing that. Is there anyone here that knows the apartment number that Brian was staying in? Is there anyone that know? There's N, and this was something that kind of surprised me. As I got there and I was like, I can't remember the apartment number. Did he stay in N? Did he stay in what was his apartment number? Did he stay in what was his apartment number? There we've got, that's the answer, G. So it took me a while to figure out that I wasn't anywhere near the right apartment. And that's part of the learning experiences when you go there in person, is you realize what you don't know, what you thought you knew, but you don't know. But can you see how the paneling, or whatever you want to call it, of these structures look a lot like the house at 1122 King Road. It looks familiar. In fact, if I showed you just a piece of it, you'd think, oh, isn't that 1122 King Road? That was another thing that was quite surprising. So just looking at these images, which place has more character? Which student neighborhood looks more interesting and has more character, would you say? Well, I don't know what the answer is, but when I was there, there was nothing going on, no one walking around, no music, nothing seemed to be going on. There were a couple of squirrels running around. Okay, that's not really part of our... So at this point, I just couldn't really remember where the apartment was. And I think I went online to check. And I was also now still searching, where is this apartment? Did it look like that? And then I basically drove all the way around to this side, from here around. And here's apartment G, but is that the right apartment? Is this it? Yeah, it does. Is this the right apartment? It's apartment G. I'm in Pullman. Is this it? That's right. It is next to a phone booth. So there was no phone booth here. So the answer is no. This is the wrong G. That's apartment G, but that's not the apartment we're looking for. So this is the right apartment. It's on this side. So that's the other thing. If you're saying that Brian was isolated, well, this was a very isolating spot to be in. It's the far end of all of these apartments, facing kind of nothing, facing this kind of big car park. He wasn't in the middle of a lot of apartments. He was at the end of kind of a lot of apartments. And they weren't particularly, they didn't seem like a lot of fun was going on. There were actually quite a few kids playing around there, little children, not students playing around there. And I think this was accommodation for families. And so that's no wonder Brian didn't really feel that he was getting. There's the phone booth, by the way. There's the phone booth. There's another angle with some of these dumpsters. This is the kind of thing he would walk into. He would walk into this setting every day. And it's another thing that frustrated me with the media photos was that you always saw this from this sort of angle, like right in front. And I wanted to see the rest, a little bit more perspective. And there you have it, family housing. So how much fun was Brian going to have in a family housing apartment complex? And the answer was very little. People would say, I don't really, I get the heebie-jeebies with that guy. Don't invite him here again. This is kind of a view almost from the front. Let's do it like this. There you can see the phone booth. That's the view from kind of the apartment side. Can you see there's literally nothing here? And so you can kind of almost imagine Brian on a weekend stepping out of his apartment and seeing that view. Compare that view to the view from 112 King Road. Think of this view of nothing compared to the view towards King Road, or the view away from King Road where you see the water tower. And I'm just saying it's a very different feel from the one place to the other. So this is a view over these bicycles, past the phone booth, and the entrance would be, well, either there or there. Okay, Timmy. Well, I'm surprised my voice has done this well over 3 hours. Okay, some squirrels. But I think you'll agree with me, it's quite a bleak setting compared to that house with all its balconies and a lot of the fun fabric that surrounds it. There's a lot of houses and apartments where you just see kids running in and out all the time. Not kids, students. So this is a close-up of it. And I think he was in 201, right? I think he was over there. And so he would have walked up and down these steps a couple of times, held onto this railing a couple of times. Well, would you say that the funhouse, would you say 1122 King Road was bleak? I don't know. I found it warm, sweet. I looked at that, especially some of the body cam, and thought, wow, I wish I'd had kind of an experience like that when I was at university. I mean, we did have parties, but that looked like it was quite a lot of fun. I mean, you would go to someone's house in town, and it wasn't terribly exciting, the house. So I don't know. The point is, I think Brian, you can understand Brian coming from here would have found that more interesting. So that's the view, literally standing in the alcove as you were going out. Again, can you see how there's nothing to see? When you're looking out, there's just nothing to see. So can you appreciate in the way that I've taken and shared this footage with you, if I haven't made the point already, it's not the same as you being there yourself, but I've given you, I think, a pretty good idea of what it's like, because I was there and I took quite a lot of footage, and I'm sharing with you, I think, fairly perceptive observations. And so isn't that enough? Or do you feel like you need to go there, otherwise you'll have no idea what's going on in this case? Do you know what I'm saying? I have given you quite a good idea, and I would say it's adequate. It's enough of an idea without you feeling, cheapest, I'm going to get on a plane and fly from wherever country or state I'm from, because I've got no idea what's going on there. Chelsea says, yes, thanks. Otherwise, if you feel like you can go there and let me know if something you see there breaks the case. I've solved this case. I've found whatever. I found a piece of I found like a little stone in the road. It changes everything, kind of thing. These are the steps going into Brian's apartment, or very near to his apartment. But you just kind of get a little bit of a sense of what is in his world. Unpainted steps, paint flaking off. That was his world. These are the steps he would go up and down every day to class, from class. He would put his hand on this railing, I guess. He would walk down these steps, and then he would see this world outside. And he would park his vehicle just out here, I guess. So that's basically it. This was the vehicle that I was driving in. I think I did ask for a Hyundai, but I think I asked for one, but they ended up giving me that. I was quite happy with that vehicle. But I found it quite tight, kind of tight spacing. This vehicle in the area behind 1122 King Road, I actually found it surprisingly tight spacing. So that's something I really didn't expect. Okay, what else do I have? So I just took this photo of what was it like driving from Brian's apartment straight to 1122 King Road. there you see I put it in 1122 King Road, 7.3 miles. Yeah, it says 11 miles, 27 minutes. That's not how long it would take you. Not quite sure why it's doing this, but and so this was starting the route to Moscow. This is the kind of fabric in terms of driving that Brian would do. Besides the day when the crime was committed, this wasn't the route that he would take then, but the route he would take on other days. Timmy, what do you want? Just another view of that. And again, just another shot of the landscape. Look how idiosyncratic this landscape is. It's like rolling hills constantly. The roads constantly turn. They turn and they go up and down. It's quite disorienting. It's not like a straight shot. It's a kind of a sea of rolling hills. Timmy's getting very hyperactive. This is coming into Moscow. Let's see what else I've got. This is coming into Queen Road. There you can see it says Queen Road. And I'm still quite far away from the house, but look how visible it is. I'm just coming into this road. Look how visible the house is. And again, look at the atmosphere here, how rich and varied it is and cool it is, basically, compared to the other one. And here's a guy who's, I guess, having a drink. He's got a Vandals flag out. You don't see any of that in the footage I've just come from. Like, I'm literally driven from Pullman to King Road, Queen Road, straight from the one spot to the other. You can see how different it is on the same afternoon. That's exactly what Brian was after. He was looking for something that was a bit more interesting than the humdrum of where he was. What's going on in Moscow? Let's take a drive. It's only 10 minutes away, whatever it is. Again, look at the houses that can all look onto this house. Okay. So that was me in front of the house at that time, boarded up, even a fence. But look at these vehicles parked right over here. Timmy. Sorry, that was a bit rough. Okay. Here's another angle. This was slightly different because when I was there at night, I felt like I could get there and leave really without being seen. Whereas in the day, there were a couple of people outside walking by and lingering. So again, just look how varied the fabric is next to this house. Look at all the different student accommodation there is over here. Okay. This again, I think, gives you a sense of how close you can get to Maddie's bedroom. Very, very close. If you were over there, you could see kind of into the house. You still can. Do you agree this is a much more fun, interesting, vibey place to be if you're a student than where Brian was staying? Peeing on the hill. Yeah, so yeah, you actually get a clear sense of if you're standing on this hill by the water tower, how visible this house is from there. And a lot of people would go to that water tower. I did. It's a landmark in Moscow, and that is also part of why I think they want to get rid of this house, is because it's so visible, so obvious when you're trying to get a sense of Moscow from this perspective. So what this is just a slightly more stepping back perspective than a lot of the other views you get from this perspective. It's just slightly further back. But there you can see how the road turns and continues going that way right in front of the house. And you can park there and almost like it's a drive-in and see what's going on in the house if you wanted to do that. Again, that shows you how close you are to Maddie's room, right? And I wonder what these things are here. Is it for the dog? Is it cushions for folks to sit on? I wonder what these are exactly. Is it mattresses, or is it for the dog? What is it for? See, so when I took this footage, right, this was in the middle of the day, well, not the middle of the day, the end of the day, but nevertheless in daylight. And I was concentrating on whatever I was concentrating on. And at this point, a vehicle rolls up. And you can imagine they're like, what are you doing here? What's going on? And what do you say? And do you think they're going to say, oh, that's nice. It's nice that you are doing what you're doing. Welcome. You want to come and have a drink? And it was shortly after this, I think, that they parked, got out, and they actually walked right by me. And that's where all of this ends. I didn't actually take any more photos after that. But I'm glad that I got to this point, because that was what I wanted to show you, is that feeling of you in, I mean, I'm there kind of because I'm working, I guess, or I'm investigating and I'm trying to figure certain things out. I'm trying to get a personal sense of the actual distances and the actual setting, right? I'm concentrating on that. But the other people that live here and they are they're going to be there when I leave, right? And they've got to focus on other things besides this. Do they want this in their faces all the time? Do they want 1,000 people like me doing what I'm doing? No, right? I don't think so. Anyway, that's my spiel. I just want to thank you guys for being here for a full 3.5 hours. Timmy thanks you as well. Actually, Timmy doesn't, because Timmy wants me back. I also want to thank the mods for being here. Terry Dean. Is Stephanie still here? I know Stephanie was here. Zircon, but a lot of you have been here for the long haul. And then also, yeah, could be a dog bed. And then also thanks a lot for the super chats, really appreciate it. Let's look at some of your last comments. The Weasel, great to hear your views. Good night all. Jalsi's good that you've been here from the beginning. I think you were one of the first comments, but thanks a lot. It seems like most of you were very kind and considerate in chat, so thanks for that. Yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Thanks, Sherry. As Brian's apartment, that's a really great question. What about Brian's apartment? Well, I think it probably has been rented, but it is an interesting question. Okay, guys, thanks very much. I think I'm going to try and play out with the outro. I just need to find it and pause it. Pause it. And then I can say goodbye to you guys properly. I'm about to put up a interesting video on the JonBenet Ramsey case that covers something that you guys may never have heard of. And then I want to go into an area that's also not something that I think I've seen anyone talk about or even think about. And we actually may have a special guest on that as well. So look out for that. A couple of things to look forward to. Thanks, guys. Kimchi, Elise, baby kisses, all of you guys, thanks very much. Take care, guys. I hope you guys have a good week. And Sherry says, I would like to see more lives. I'll see what I can do. Run the World, thanks very much. I saw your comment on Patreon. Thanks for that. I think it was on the Mountain Mystery on Aconcagua, maybe something to look into. Thanks, guys. Take care. As Zircon says, thanks for supporting me, and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.